And welcome to Colors of the Dark. Happy holidays and welcome to our end of year top 10 show. I'm excited. It looks like Elric brought liquor.
I brought liquor. I brought bourbon, Christmas
Bourbon.
bourbon.
I have peach tea,
Mm.
a calming peach tea.
My year requires bourbon. This is me closing out the year. Still not done with work. Still have a couple days of work. I just gotta get out of the city, away from my computer, and I will be refreshed in January.
I'm not allowed to drink because of if you've listened to our Patreon, sure you've heard me complain about it. I ended up a couple of weeks ago with like a crazy bad ear infection that ended up taking my hearing. And I'm now undergoing all of these tests and procedures, but I still don't have hearing back in my right ear. And because of the steroids they have me on, I'm not supposed to drink right now. So calming peach tea
Because
it is.
normally you're hardcore. You're like
I
a
know.
whiskey
Usually
sour
I'm like
gal.
boozing it up. No, the few times I do drink is at Disney because I really like the mixed drinks at Disney. And even yesterday I was like, they've got these cool like Christmas themed liqueurs like cookies and cream with like a nice little shot in it, and I couldn't sample any of it. So kind of bummed. Or I probably should have, and then it just would have been a really good time on the Incredicoaster, I feel
I
like.
did not know they had alcohol at Disneyland.
Oh my God, that's the whole reason. That's why California Adventure is so much better than the regular park because California Adventure has all the booze, especially during Christmas time because they set up stands all over. Like you cannot go more than like 50 feet without bumping into like a booze stand
Hmm.
at Christmas time. It's amazing.
Now I know why you're
So
always
yeah,
there.
best time to
Your
visit.
secret
You
lush. I like it. Secret Disney lush. I
get a
appreciate it.
margarita and ride like Little Mermaid. It's kind of a beautiful day.
Well, we have done it. We have survived an entire year.
We
Uh,
haven't yet.
well, not
We have
yet.
like we have 20 more days to
No, but
go.
this is our
Well,
last
like
episode.
17.
I don't
Yes.
care about real life. I just care about, we survived the horror year,
The
the
podcasting
podcasting
life.
year. We've survived. And so we are in the second half of our show going to count down our top 10, the thing we always work towards every year. I think I've seen over like 73 or so,
Yeah.
which is
I
pretty
was
high, I think, for a new film year, like for new horror films, I'd say for me. And we'll talk about that when we get there. We have a few that
yeah.
don't quite make it that we're going to discuss now, some new movies, and then we're going to also count down our five. At the top, we're going to do our five favorite non-movies that were horror
Yep.
things from this year, which should be a little bit of fun. So let's jump into what didn't make the list. What'd you watch this
So
week?
I'm gonna kick off with one that I gotta say, this was kind of close. Like I will probably include this in my discards, but at the end when I'm talking about kind of the runners up, but I'm gonna put it here because I really enjoyed it and I just watched it. And that's the new film, There's Something in the Barn.
Hmm.
This kind of crept in out of nowhere. I saw a couple of people posting about it online and I was like, okay, why not? It's got oh gosh, his name's gonna Guilfoyle from Silicon Valley TV show. He was the Satanist on Silicon Valley. He is the lead. He plays a dad who has just recently gotten remarried and he has inherited a very kind of rural, isolated farm in Norway. And so he sweeps up the entire family and moves them there in the middle of winter, and everybody is pissed off. His kids are completely angry about the whole thing. But he and his new wife have this ambition of turning this massive barn in the backyard into an Airbnb bed and breakfast type thing. And they get there, and everybody in town is completely weirded out by them because they don't know, don't touch the moose, don't do this. And there's also all of these kind of folk stories that start to come in about creatures, Nissen, I think they're called, that are these little kind of gnomish creatures that live in barns, and that there's certain things that you have to do. There's rules for them. Like they hate artificial light and they don't like loud noises, and you're never allowed to make any structural changes to the barn. And you have to feed them porridge on Christmas Eve with cinnamon. And there's all of these very specific rules. And if you're nice to them, they will help you. It's kind of like the shoemaker thing, where if you're really nice to them, they will help you. But if you break any of these rules, they will fuck your shit up and probably kill you. And so they start hearing all of these weird stories about them. And then the son, their young son, discovers that they have one in the barn. And he's really nice to it at first. And so suddenly, like their entire wood pile has been chopped up, and they start finding things repaired around the house. And they think it's their neighbors that are doing it because they're just very welcoming people. And then some of the rules start getting broken.
Hmm.
And it was fun. I watched this with my kids. I will call this horror light. It's definitely bloody. Like it's incredibly bloody, but it's not grotesque, and it's fun, and it's always funny at the same time. I'd put it in the same vein of like a Five Nights at Freddy's. So I watched this with both of my kids, and they just roared the entire time. And I had a lot of fun with it too, because it was not a legend I was familiar with. Ran a little long for, what I think it could have been. Like, I'm always the one who's going to be like, tighten that movie up. Ran a little long, but that said, it was a blast. Like, this was close to making my top 10 list. It's not doing as well critically though, which kind of shocks me. I thought
Sounds a bit
fun.
like Gremlins, a little bit like with
It is.
rules and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a similar setup to Gremlins, but is using a very old folk legend. And the gnomes, like the actual like barn elves, are so crazily well done, and they're all types of wild. So yeah, there's something in the barn. I rented this off Amazon for like $7.
Okay, I have one that is not for your kids whatsoever. That it was one that I had heard just recently about, and it was only available on Apple for rent, which was kind of strange because there isn't many new horror films that only are available there usually. This one was called Do Not Disturb, and it's by a guy, John Ainsley. It was pretty interesting. It's a couple are basically going on a kind of a honeymoon, even though they've been together a very long time, and it's not like, it doesn't feel like a traditional honeymoon because they've been a couple for so long. They're down in Miami, and they just want to kind of cut loose, and the guy seems very interested in just getting as high as he can, and she's looking to kind of connect, and they're in different places, but they've checked into an adults kind of hotel, and it's a very indie film. There's a swinger couple that's kind of hitting on them, and they're of mixed interest. There's some pretty funny scenes of that kind of stuff. They end up on a beach, and this crazy person, remember that whole Florida kind of bath salt thing where people are turning
Oh yeah.
mental zombie. Anyway, some guy emerges out of the ground, like they didn't even know he's there. He's in the back of a shot, you didn't even know he's there, out of his mind, and ends up leaving them all these bags of drugs. And the husband eventually convinces his wife, because they're not getting along great, to be like, let's do some hard drugs. They think it's peyote, they don't know what it is exactly, in their hotel room. And then the rest of the movie is them not just doing crazy drugs, and a lot of it, but also realizing, oh, there's also half-eaten body under our bed now, and we blacked out a whole bunch of time. Oops. And it becomes this kind of basic sexual cannibal weird, but the tone is always quite funny and kind of messed up. A really good performance by the woman in it, Kimberly LaFerriere. Again, very indie. Didn't know anything about it except that I was looking up films that I might have missed, and I thought it was pretty fun. It's definitely, if you're into interesting, crazy indies, the drug stuff's pretty fun, because you always have to come up with original ways to shoot drug trips, especially if there's time being lost and people going on these kind of ups and downs and like missing time. And so that's Do Not Disturb. And maybe it's gone broader a week later. I watched it about a week ago, so otherwise Amazon for that one.
Wow. Okay, that one sounded a lot of fun.
It's interesting.
Next up, I was really lukewarm on this. I was really looking forward to it because I love folk horror so much, but it just didn't do it for me quite as much. This is Lord of Misrule. And this one, like, to watch the trailer, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be my favorite movie of the year, because it does look like Wicker Man at Christmas time. And, using kind of the European Lord of Misrule pagan mythology. And it is about a woman. She's a pastor. She moves to this tiny little rural town that has a lot of pagan roots to it. They've got a lot of tradition going on with her daughter. And you get from the start that, like, her daughter is not very good. Her daughter is like got these sadistic nature to her. There's animal abuse. Like, she's just not, she's messed up. And she gets named they're doing this harvest celebration, this massive kind of fall celebration. And the girl gets named like whatever the harvest princess of this celebration is. And then shortly thereafter goes missing. And as everybody in town is like trying to find her, and the woman is freaking out about where her daughter is, you slowly start to uncover all of this darker, more paganistic stuff about the town. If I read online, and I completely agree with this sentiment, if A24 had put their logo up at the top of this movie, everybody would love it. But because it's paced like an A24 film, it's getting very mixed
But is it?
reviews because
The only thing I ever take offense to that, because I hear that all the time. But is it shot as well as them? Because that's the thing people forget about A24
it
films.
is.
Look incredible though. Like they
It
look
is.
so good. Okay, I'll.
It's beautifully
Okay,
shot. I gotta say, it
yeah.
is beautifully shot. It is all just these gorgeously candlelit
Mm.
scenes. Everything's very dark. It's beautifully shot. But nothing really happens until about the 45-minute mark. And then not enough happens to make it really exciting until about the last 15 minutes. And then even that was just kind of like, okay. So I love the premise of this. It looked beautiful. I was definitely compelled the entire way through. I love the folk story behind it. This is William Brent Bell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of a lot of his work. This one, it was just a little too dry and slow paced for me. I needed more happening in the first 45 minutes. It took its time, really atmospheric. I will say that. Like there was never a time that there was not just brimming with atmosphere, but it took its time getting to where it needed to go. And I kind of wanted, The Wicker Man, it's not exactly, a speedy film, but there's definitely weird shit happening throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of needed more of that and less of just, the girl in the town and things. They weren't weird enough to keep it captivating. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Lords of Misrule. Again, if you're into slow burn horror, this may be your jam. Not quite for me, but yeah, there's some good stuff in here regardless.
A real quickie, because you've already talked about it a couple months back, was on Hulu. There's a film called Clock
Yep.
by Alex Jacknow. And there's things I liked about this. It's a woman. She doesn't, I mean, the character's interesting because the woman played by Diana Agron, who is from
Mhm.
the, what's that show? The popular High School Musical show where they're always singing.
Glee
Yeah, Glee. Uh,
or High School the
no,
Musical.
Glee.
There's a
Yeah, she's
couple.
from Glee.
Glee.
She has the blonde in Glee, and here she's brunette.
Yes.
She doesn't want children, has zero interest in having children, but everyone acts like that's a strange thing. All the friends and other people and her best friends having a baby. And so there's a baby shower at the start, and she just isn't interested. It's not in her purview at all. And then people start pressuring her, and she realizes, well, maybe I should look into it. And people basically, a doctor, there's a scene that I really early on was just like almost made me want to stop even watching because the doctor's like, maybe your biological clock's just broken. And when I hear that, it's just sounds like such complete horseshit to me. Like that, like no, I don't. Is that even it's not a like literal clock? And I don't know. There's something in my brain that was just like, wait a minute, I don't think doctors
So
talk like this.
you're told it's like a hormonal imbalance. Yeah.
Right?
That like
But
you reach a
the
certain
wording,
age and the hormones
yeah.
are supposed to make it
And I'm fine
happen.
if somebody said that, but I was like, when a doctor says, I could just be that your biological clock's broken, I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck are you? Don't listen to this doctor, go to a different. Anyway, yeah, no, it's a movie. And she goes to this, enrolls in a clinical trial, and then shit gets kind of weird there, where she watches these weird videos and these like deprivation tanks, and just she starts seeing the cool thing about it that I really did like is she starts seeing this tall, spooky figure that comes to her like a premonition, and it is connected to her past, which has some interesting roots in Judaism. Like there's some pretty interesting stuff that I wasn't expecting from this movie.
Yeah.
I'm a little burned out. I think this is like the fourth or fifth. We have the nanny exploitation, which is going to come back again this episode, which I'm definitely burned out on. And then we also have the pregnant exploitation, and especially on Hulu. I feel like I've seen 3 or 4. There was that terrible one that had Pierce Brosnan. I think it was False Positive. It just didn't work. There's quite a few of these movies, but this one has some pretty cool scenes, but they're sometimes the ones that aren't as involved in the actual story, like to the side of the story bit.
This one had cool nightmare sequences.
Yeah.
That was I liked this movie for the most part, and I remember it had really cool nightmare sequences, and I loved the Jewish folklore side because I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, it was a surprise, and also it had some. I saw Ruben X in there as her dad, and he's always good.
Mm-hmm.
It had some pretty cool editing sequences when things get crazy too. I don't know. Maybe there's with Hulu sometimes. I think we did talk about this off air.
They're all based off short films.
And this is the second in a row that I've seen after Appendage that both were obviously shorts, and both you kind of felt like maybe they need a little more time when you're percolating the feature length version of a script. But again, interesting movie. But you'd already mentioned it.
Yeah. Covering one that you had already mentioned, which did not make my top 10, Venus.
Ooh,
this is another one where
hold it for later.
Okay, hold it for later.
Hold it for later. But I'll make sure you can talk about it properly.
Yeah. Okay, and then let's talk about Raging Grace.
Yeah, what did you think? Because you saw it right after me, I think.
Okay, so this one is getting super high reviews. So I went in and maybe just my expectations were a little too high. It's an immigrant mom from the Philippines with her daughter. And I loved that character. She was just brazen. She is a housekeeper for a living. So she literally spends her day, if you spend the first 20 minutes just following her, as she goes from house to house cleaning. And she does like 10 houses in one day. And it's just continuous work. And then she comes home and she's barely making enough to take care of her daughter. And she is doing something illegal to help out a friend of hers. And in the process, gets a job as a caretaker for a very, very wealthy woman, making far more than she ever made cleaning like 10 houses in a day.
And
And
technically,
so,
they were homeless. Like they didn't
yeah,
even have
they
a.
were
They just
homeless.
they
Yeah.
just stuck in the houses there. She was cleaning.
Yeah.
That seems pretty
Yeah.
tenuous. Yeah.
Yeah, like they as she was cleaning houses, they would like crash there. And so this one is offering her a room, but they don't know she has a daughter, so she has to keep her daughter hidden there. But that said, it's a huge mansion. And so she's like, "Okay, I'm going to keep you hidden here. I'm going to make this much money. It's going to be awesome. This doesn't have to be forever, but this will give us enough to have a new life." And her specific job there, in addition to like the cleaning and the cooking, is she is taking care of a very elderly man who is in the process of passing away. And he doesn't seem very coherent most of the time. And, he's basically hooked up to machines and they just have to kind of, the family's there to watch him pass away. And that's our setup. And I don't know how much more to say because I don't want to spoil any of the twists. It takes a long time to get going. I liked a lot of the atmosphere. I liked her character was the best part. Like her character and the acting for me was the best part. It did not turn into anything I hadn't seen before. And I really wanted it to. Like I kept waiting for the, oh my God, this is great. I've never seen anything like this moment. And it just didn't get there.
It
But what
needed to
did you
be
think?
grosser. Like so when we get to the midpoint twist, and we'll dance around it, which it involves the old man. I feel like once that twist happens, I feel like I had to go a lot further and a lot creepier and a lot weirder because there's a couple moments where you're like, oh, that's where it's going, and then it doesn't, and it becomes much more of a character based thing.
Peace.
It reminds me of the other one reason exploitation was on my mind was because it was that one. Oh, I can't remember, but it won Sundance last year, and I reviewed it at the start of the year for the show, and it was the same thing where it's like they're shot pretty well, they're okay, but they have like these incredibly high reviews, and I'm with both of them. I'm kind of like, what is it? Is it just a social message that people are responding to? Because the films themselves are just okay.
Or maybe we're just like all like, hardened and I'm like, go full horror. If you're not,
Could
if
be,
I'm
yeah.
not seeing a body transformation scene, then I'm not, in. Because this is very much, I would struggle to call this a horror movie. Like it's there, but it's definitely kind of every single time that you think it's going to go where you think it's going to go, it just kind of skirts it and backs off a lot. And yeah, so it really kind of skirts the horror most of the way through.
Yeah, and her daughter's name is Grace, so it's called Raging Grace. Interesting film, also set in the British countryside, and almost could have been one of those British Christmas movies, horror movies we like, if it had just taken a few different directions. But decent.
Setting was really
Setting is
fascinating.
cool. Yeah,
Character was really good. I needed the horror to feel more
I
comfortable.
love that. I
I needed it
forgot the
more.
name of the Sundance winner when we're talking about nanny exploitation, and the title I was looking for is Nanny.
Well done.
So that one's shot even better. I actually did like that one more, but they're similar kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I caught up on a couple of book reads as well. A big one that I want to talk about is Your Lonely Nights Are Over. This is a YA horror, and I don't usually talk about YA horror on a show. A lot of times I'll save that for the deep cut show because I love getting tweets of like, where are you talking about 16-year-old literature and Colors of the Dark? But I'm doing it here because this was a really good book. Your Lonely Nights Are Over. It is about a group of high school students that have a queer club. It specifically focuses on two high school boys. And these murders start happening at their school to members of the queer club. And they realize that one of their teachers may be a serial killer. And it was really good. That sounds kind of, overwrought as I'm
Sounded pretty
describing
good to
it.
me. I would
Yeah.
watch that.
But it was really, really well done. This is honestly, it's one of my favorite books I've read this year, especially in the YA space. I finished one called Chlorine, which was also more YA oriented about a Chinese American swimmer. She's like she lives for swimming. She's obsessed with the pool. It's all she wants to do. Any other parts of her life, she just wishes she was back in the pool because that's where she feels most comfortable. And this one takes a siren bend where she starts feeling these changes and she starts feeling more rage and more connected to the water. And it definitely starts to transform. So this one, YA, definitely cool. The Weight of Blood, I will quickly say, this one was by Tiffany D. Jackson. I can describe this as African American Carrie. Where a girl's being picked on, and the weight of blood, like it's literally like a Carrie reference. And so that one was really good. God, all I did this week was read, and the rest of them I'm going to save because they're going to pop up later on my list.
I think I'm gonna watch, one of my New Year's resolutions is to watch 100 less movies and read 20 more books, maybe 10 more books, because I'm approaching like 550 movies this year, and I'm like, you know what? I don't need 550 movies. I can do 400 and still feel pretty good about watching a lot of movies, you know?
I'm telling you, books on tape. I'm going to keep preaching this to you. And which reminded me, this was another one that I finished last week because I listened to it on tape. Where the Dead Waits. This was a really cool Arctic ghost story about a group of explorers where they disappear in the Arctic long ago, and then another group is sent in to try to find them and figure out what happened to them. And it turns into this really cool Arctic ghost story. That is Where the Dead Waits. I think that one just came out like 3 weeks ago, I want to say. I had the galley copy, and then I listened to the last part of it while driving last week, and it was good.
Are you up to date on that Murders at the End of the World?
I am on episode 5. I have 3 more to go.
Okay, I think there's only 1 left coming.
I know.
Okay, so I did watch the most recent last night. It was good. It gets good. Yeah, okay. I'm kind of back, like in a couple episodes where I'm like, and then I'm kind of circled back into really being curious how they're going to wrap it up.
I got to catch back up on that really bad.
I had 3 more films, but I'll be quick. Do it. One of them I love, and you will love, but you might want to watch it in a couple sittings. The documentary We Kill for Love. This is the 3-hour documentary, which seems like
Jesus Christ,
seems like a lot, but once you get going, I planned to watch it in 2 nights, and then I just sat through the whole thing. It is about the forgotten direct-to-video erotic thrillers, and it's fascinating because there are. When I heard that, and I saw some of the names who are going to be in the documentary, like Warnowski and people like that, I'm like, okay, so yes, they cover Fatal Attraction and Sliver and Basic Instinct, but they go so far beyond those to probably like 50 movies I not even haven't heard of, but are even below the ones that I've heard of, subgenres and subcategories, and it was so fascinating about all the different trends and all the different patterns, and it's quite captivating the way they approach it. They approach it like this weird archivist has entered and he's going through, like, almost like if you're trying to explain this to aliens, like what this trend in the 90s was. So I think it's, probably for your average person, watch an hour a night, and it's just a cool little take into the direct-to-video erotic thrillers. It was a lot of people we know were involved in its making, and I didn't think I would like have so much fun with it, but it's terrific. High recommendation on that. That's on Amazon. You can watch.
Love it.
We Kill for Love, and
I just added that to my queue.
You'll
definitely
yeah,
sounds like, I read this really great article yesterday on why theaters want to bring back the intermission.
Yeah.
And apparently,
well, wait, did you have intermission when you were little or not? Because in New Zealand I did.
No,
interesting. So I wonder when that ended here.
We did at the drive-in, because when I was a kid, most of the movies I saw, because we had a drive-in in my hometown, but for many years we would have to drive one town over to go to like an indoor theater. We didn't get one of those till I was almost in middle school. But at the drive-in, there was always an intermission because they wanted people to go buy more snacks. But yeah, so we didn't at the regular theater. But what this was specifically talking about Killers of the Flower Moon, and about how a lot of the theaters were really concerned about the length. And this is smaller theaters, like mom and pop theaters, where they can do this certain thing, that some theaters, there was one in Colorado and one in Florida, had put an intermission in and said, okay, we're going to play an hour and a half, 15 minutes. We'll finish it up the next like 3.5 hours or however fucking long it is. It's super long. And apparently then the studio sued them and said, you cannot show it like that. We are charging, you're going to have to pay fees back to us because you did this. But the theater is like, and I get it from the theater's perspective. They're saying, okay, look, at that length, we can only show it twice a day.
Yeah.
So you're limiting our screening time. And with that, you're cutting down on our popcorn sales because that's where we make money. And if we can't be bringing constantly people in every 2 hours, we're losing money. But if we do an intermission, they can come out and buy more snacks. And I get it. I totally get it. I also get filmmaker vision and not wanting to have your movie interrupted. But if you're making a 3.5 hour movie, you have to assume at some point people have to go use the bathroom.
I think it's bad. Yeah, I mean, I think it's would be smart as the filmmaker to want that, because if you're making Oppenheimer and you've planned exactly when that break is, you know that somebody isn't missing a critical scene. Because like the amount of movies I've gone to with you, where you have to naturally go to the bathroom or something, it's like you're going to miss something.
I have to go to the bathroom every hour on the hour.
In fact, you missed my favorite kill in one of the movies that will be in our top 10. And I remember you walking back and I was like, oh, that was such a good kill.
It's a constant thing where midway through the movie, I will have to step out to go to the bathroom and then I will come back in and say, Elric, fill me in.
Well,
and then he has to
good.
Recap.
I
always
watch
try.
you always watching the net because you understand screenplay so well. So you're always going, well, this is going to be a natural break. But in a horror film, that doesn't always work out because something crazy can happen.
I'm always like, okay, I feel like after this kill, there's going to be a solid 10-minute lull before it picks back up. And so that's when I'll usually try to time it right after a kill. And it doesn't always work.
I'm certainly look, I'm a little mixed. As a kid, I loved it because it was a chance to go back out and get more candy, and I really dug it. Growing up in New Zealand with that, I think for kids movies that's a great idea, because like if you go to Spider-Verse and it's 2 hours, you know, most kids have about a 1 hour time span, and then they're going to come back in and be coked up again on sugar and be all into it again. So that to me sounds like a good, and with the movie, as long as like Flowers Moon surprised me because I didn't feel the time, but that doesn't mean it isn't long. It's super long. I just, because of the way it was paced, I didn't feel that time. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's something worth exploring again, because it also makes movies, especially event movies, like big Marvel movies. Like, why not? It's an event. Yeah, have a break, sell more, make more money, and make everyone happy. You know.
It would also make me go more because like Strummer really wanted to see, he's obsessed with Indiana Jones. Like we've watched every single one of the movies many, many times, and he really wanted to go see the new one, but that thing was like pretty 2.5 hours long. And I'm like, he's 7. I can't get him through that. Like he's going to have to go run laps around the theater, and then we could come back in and finish. But I ended up taking him, and we had to do our self intermission where midway through 10 minutes, we had to go outside, use the bathroom, get another drink, have some junior mints, do a couple laps, and then go back and sit down. And we missed 15 minutes of the movie. And anyway, it's a debate to continue.
I don't think I'd want it for a 90-minute movie. I must say, like we were watching a horror film that me and you went to see, and it's 90 minutes, like A Smile or something. I don't think I would want a break in that kind of a movie. So I guess it's not a 1-to-1. Anyway, last couple. One I was hoping you would have seen, but hopefully next you'll watch it soon. This is the big Netflix one, The Leave the World Behind.
That's 2.5 hours. I didn't have time this week.
No, I know. And this is Sam Esmail. I mostly wanted.
I do. I love Sam Esmail.
Yeah, his stuff's really smart and really interesting. A couple of my friend Brian really liked it. Our friend Dick really liked it. Gave it like 4 stars. I didn't love it. I liked it. I thought it was really interesting. I didn't. Some of the CGI sometimes just can take me quickly out of a movie. But it's a family. Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke. They live in Brooklyn with their 2 kids. They wake up one morning and she's like, you know what? I've booked us an Airbnb. And he's like waking up like, what? Like where are we going? And they're going out to to spend a weekend at the beach. And it's kind of spur of the moment. And she has a great monologue to open the movie where she's like, I look out the window and everyone's just doing stuff. And then I realize I don't like people. And it's just quite funny, like quite relatable. They go out there and they book this amazingly huge house, like just gorgeous. That's where they're going to spend the weekend. They have 2 teenagers, and they go to the beach. And when they're at the beach, there's a moment where they're just lying on the beach, and a giant ship, like a oil tanker, just keeps coming closer and closer and closer and closer. And then they're like, wait a minute, why is it coming so close? And you realize it's coming onto the beach and it's not stopping. And that's like the first thing. And then you start seeing deer acting weird. And then, so they basically at this house, their cell phones don't work. Everything starts going dark. And you realize that you don't know exactly. It holds its cards pretty close all the way through. And I'm not going to ruin it, but about what's actually happening. Is this an attack on America? Is this like just some sort of blackout? Is this a cyber attack? Like you don't know, because you won't know, because you'll have no information when this happens, because you won't have a phone or a TV or a radio. So it's pretty interesting how it starts ramping up the thing. It gets weirder, and when it gets weirder, it gets better, in my opinion. Mahershala, sorry, Ali, won the Oscar a couple years ago, and an actress, Maya La from Bodies, is his daughter in this. They show up, and he's wearing a tuxedo, and they're like, "This is our house." And Ethan Hawke and Julia Roberts like, no, it's not. We rent it, and Julia Roberts gets to be a bit of a Karen in it, which is kind of fun to watch. And Mahershala is like, no, seriously, it's our house. I rented it to you. And we were in the city, and there's a blackout, and now we want to come here and stay because we're worried about what's going to happen. And there's a whole like, do we trust them? Do we not? Are they going to let them in? And there's also a crosstown, a guy played by Kevin Bacon who has been stalking up prior to this happening, and people noticed it, so they're wondering, does he know stuff they don't know? Really intriguing stuff. The thing that scared me was after the movie. I liked the movie. I like it's a solid movie. After the movie, I read that Obama he was an EP, but he also was the main consultant to Sam Esmail about what would happen. And that's why it's scary, because when you're watching this, you're like, oh man, I guess that could happen. I guess. And if Obama from inside is telling you this is how it would go down, it makes the whole thing quite a bit scarier because he's been in the room.
That's really fascinating, actually. Yeah. That just intrigued me even more than just, horror film with Julia Roberts.
I have a weird feeling this would have made your top 10. Like, I just have a feeling, like, knowing Dick and thinking everyone's, because it's very much about the ideas. It's like scary ideas. And there was nothing specific like that I wasn't into. Maybe, well, I will say, so the film that I worked on with our friend Delilah, that's coming out, like it's started to play at festivals and stuff. It's almost like the no budget version of this movie. It's like got so many of the same ideas, like especially with the animals and kind of nature's retort to things like this. And so it was kind of weird to watch this big budget kind of version of this, of a similar idea. Not that they're connected. That might have taken me out a little bit, but interesting film. Leave the World Behind on Netflix. With big stars, cool to see Julia Roberts challenging herself and not taking it easy, because it's not the easiest role she's playing. Nice. And the last one I watched was one I had to fit in because Dick had raved about it, and it was pretty good, called Blood. I don't know if you saw this.
I've heard of this one. This was on my list and I didn't get to it.
It didn't end up making my list. It's Brad Anderson, who has made some pretty great films. Session 9. This is a kind of a new take on the vampire. It's Michelle Monaghan and Skeet Ulrich are separated parents. She's now moved because of a bad relationship, and she's moved with her 2 kids to this farm that she used to live on, and doesn't seem that thrilled to be there. And she wasn't a great mom. She was like a bit of a drug addict, and that was caused a bunch of problems in her relationship. And her son loves their dog, and something happens to the dog kind of mysteriously out in the woods. And when it comes back, it's brutal, goes a little Cujo, bites the kid, and from that moment the kid needs blood. And that's all I'll say. It's pretty interesting. It's definitely realistic. It's treated as Dick said, it's one of the most King setups you've ever seen, Stephen King type setups, even though it's not a King movie. And he's right, it really is. And it's pretty intense. It's very grounded. Just lacked something that I was looking for in that when we're kind of finalizing our lists. But interesting film. And that came out a few months back, called Blood.
I heard that Skeet Ulrich is really good in it. That was what intrigued me the most.
Yeah, he's kind of like the side player though, like the dad. But it's an interesting, that guy makes hard movies. Like he's not a light, he's not horror light or anything. But yeah, I always like to see new takes or like new kind of twists on vampire ideas. It's always fun. So that is what we've been watching.
Yeah, it was a lot. Every year cramming. I do this where we're cramming in, and I'm watching like 2 a night and trying to make sure I've got everything and catching up on TV shows and everything. So yeah, it gave me a clear picture, and I knew I could go into my top 10 and my top 5 other things, knowing that I have seen the majority of the stuff this season. Yeah,
we do the work. Now that's like somebody always writes me at the last minute. They're like, "What about these 2?" And then I'll look them up. Somebody wrote me a couple days ago on Letterboxd or something and sent me 2, and they're both ones that haven't come out in this America. They premiered at like Fantastic Fest, like cool sounding movies. The Red Rooms or something looked really cool, but they're not available. Is that
based on the comic?
I don't know. There was multiple films with that title, but that was one. It was in French, I think, the title. So it was like
probably not. So there is a brutal comic out called The Red Room that I read occasionally. It's honestly almost a bit much for me.
Because that's a killing room, effectively, right? A red room.
Yeah.
It's like a
yeah. And the comic is, again, it's almost a bit much for me. There are days that I can handle it, and other times when I read 4 pages and I'm like, okay, I need a break. This does not seem to be based on the comic by any stretch. But if anybody out there is like totally brutal, you should check out Red Room. That's it's kind of the wildest comic you can find right now. Yeah, this looks
Yeah,
good.
so I do appreciate people who write to us giving us those, because a couple that made on my list
This
are really good.
is Red Rooms. It's for a Canadian psychological film. Yeah, definitely has not made its way down here yet outside of Fantasia. No,
Yeah,
we have not seen
festivals.
it.
That's the great thing about them.
Yeah.
All right. So what we're gonna do, this is gonna be brief. I figure. We're gonna do, well, this part we're gonna do our 5 other horror, because our other part might be
Yeah, this
long.
is going to be like the shortest show we do of the year,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure.
this part's gonna be brief. I mean, the top 10 we'll get to, but we're gonna do our 5 other horror things too, so we can keep the main event for the other films. So, do you want to go? Are yours in order of your 5 things, or is it just 2 rounds?
They are.
Okay.
No,
Yeah, I'll do.
I always put things in order.
Yeah.
That's how you make a proper list.
Well, my top 10 is, but these 5 things I could do either way.
I put them in order. So in my 5th place of other things in horror space that I thought kicked ass this year, I put The Last of Us.
Yeah, really good.
Which I have been sick to death of zombies. I've been sick to death of The Walking Dead. I haven't watched The Walking Dead in years. Even if zombie films came out, I would have to be convinced to watch them. Like somebody would have to be like, you have to see Train to Busan. And I would go, God, I'm sick of zombies. And they'd go, yeah, but it's not about the zombies. And then I'd go watch it and cry. And so for me to become obsessed with what is at its core, basically, it's a fungus, but it's still a zombie show, is big. It has to be really good. And then going to LA Comic-Con 2 weekends ago and seeing that this, in a sense, has become kind of the new Walking Dead. Like this was everywhere, and there were people dressed up like it, and people, kind of doing the whole character thing and shirts. And it was nice to see some horror media kind of taking that stronghold again, where Stranger Things has been, or where Walking Dead was, where it is this mass level of fandom. And so I deeply enjoyed it, and I'm just glad that something made it into mass discussions, to mainstream discussions, and Last of Us did that this year, so I wanted to include it.
And again, it does it because of the emotion. It does it because
Yeah.
of the Shogun assassin setup, like,
Yeah.
an older man, younger girl. It's great. Super fun. Yeah, my number 5, very simple, will surprise absolutely no one. I just gave it to you for your present, but my favorite release on disc is Messiah of Evil from Radiance. That's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
And I got this version that also had the little booklet, which I haven't read yet, but it's Bill Ackerman, friend of the show, wrote one of the essays, and Amanda Reyes. Really cool. Very much, this is one of my favorite movies, and one of both of our favorite movies. And it has always had kind of shitty quality versions. Eventually there was a, what was it? Bill Olsen, Blu-ray that was decent, but this is a big step up. And so Archive Worlds, this is the one you want, guys. If you're only going to buy it once, Messiah of Evil.
Looks beautiful. Okay, in my number 4 spot is a book, one that I just talked about, I guess, back in October. And this is What Kind of Mother by Clay McLeod Chapman, Chapman, who has been on our show before. I've discussed this on the show. This was the one about the psychic in Virginia, on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, down where it crabs along the bay. And one of her high school friends shows up and says his son went missing years ago. They never found him, and he wants her help finding them because he thinks he's still alive. And this goes bonkers places where I did not expect it to go, but never once was I bored. This was the type of book where I just had to keep reading, where I would say, I'm just going to read a chapter before bed. And like 5 chapters later, I'm like, I'm going to kick myself at 7 a.m. and I'm still reading. Like I just couldn't put it down. So this one, it's not a traditional horror story. It's not wherever you think it's going to go. It doesn't go there. It's not that. But if you're looking for something weird and something really Lovecraftian, What Kind of Mother definitely pushes there.
Nice. And for those who are listening to this and have never realized, we do currently have these episodes on YouTube, and I am actually pulling up things because at the last second before recording, I realized, hey, I've got some of these things, so I'm going to pull some of them up. So if you're looking for pictures of things, go listen to YouTube. My next one is the Scary Movies Writer's Guide from Seth M.
Ooh.
Sherwood, who I met for the first time in real life this weekend at our friend Alma's wedding, and told him how much I dug this. And I'll show you just so you understand why it's so cool. It's like the images, it's this kind of old, yeah, it's
Oh,
not just like some lame workbook.
those are
It's like it feels
beautiful.
like looking at an EC Comics how to
Mhm.
write a screenplay, and it's just got fun little like plot points and guides and like tropes and ideas for when I think if you kind of are just feeling like flatline, it could be a fun reanimator. It's not it's not going to be a whole film school, but it's really neat and it's thin and it's not like some boring workbook. I thought it was pretty cool and very creative. So that is the Scary Movie Writer's Guide. I think I got that on Amazon.
And I got I guess it was a galley. Mine did not, I got a PDF and
Mm.
mine did not have those beautiful pictures
Oh,
in
that's
it.
a big
So
difference. Yeah, it's really
I
cool.
gotta pick that up. Okay, in my number 3 spot, also a book, which I'm excited because a couple of our friends have a book club, kind of a horror book club called the Losers Book Club, which is everybody who's been on the show before. It's like Bria Grant and
Chelsea and Sean Keller and
Chelsea and Sean. Yeah, a lot of our prior guests have this horror centric book club here in LA, and they are reading this week, and I
oh,
was
cool.
super excited. This is Boys in the Valley by Philip Francasi. And this is one, I think I read this back during the summer. And this is about the boys' school. It's a boys' orphanage that is run by monks and very old timey in Pennsylvania. It's very rural, set apart. It's freezing cold there. The boys are not they're mistreated, like it's a shitty place. They're not abused to the point of that's what the story's about. It's just no one there really cares about them. They're very much orphans. A couple of the monks are more giving than the other ones, but the guy who runs the place is just a total sadistic asshole. And one day this guy shows up, says, we just happened upon this group of people that were eating a kid and he's out of his mind and we shot him and we need to bring him inside and see if you can nurse him back to health and if there's anything that they can do. And they bring the guy inside and he is clearly possessed by something. Like they when they found him, he was eating a kid. And the cop shot him or the local sheriff shot him and brought him here. And whatever it is slowly starts to infect the entire monastery. And it's not just going one person to person, it's infecting it. And it's infecting the orphanage and everybody within it. This was slow crawl, but always really punchy. It's like Lord of the Flies ish with a possession bend to it. And so this was another one where I couldn't put it down, where it'd be like 2 a.m. and I'm like, oh God, I have to be up in 4 hours and I can't stop reading. So that is Boys in the Valley. I think this released back in March and I probably covered it in June or thereabouts.
Okay, yeah, that does sound like a rad one. My number 3 is also a novel. It's kind of novel. It's a novel, almost a kind of thin '70s novel that you could read almost in one sitting. I picked it even though it's not new. I picked it because it was my favorite thing I read this year. It is very old. Me and you have talked about
Oh,
it. It's called Blood Fever. Great cover. It is. I wouldn't be talking about it if I had in fact procured the rights, because I'd be hiding this book. But in fact, I failed to procure the rights because they wanted a lot more money. So I did try. I went all the way down to get this because this feels like a lost Romero film is what it feels like to me. It feels
ooh.
like somewhere between Crazies and Rabid, like between that and Cronenberg. It really is so cinematic, and it's exactly the kind of thing I would have loved to have done. But it is out of print, so this might cost you $75 just to find a copy. If you go on eBay, you might get lucky for $5 because it's not like it's great quality. So put it on your radar. It is. It just literally opens with a guy coming home from work. When he left to go to work, his wife wasn't feeling great, and he gets home from work. She is now full crazy psychotic mode, not there at all, animal basically. And what happens very quickly is every single woman in the town turns into this state of being, and they are only driven to attack and kill the men. And so you enter the thing, and what could make that, it's like not misogyny, because it's kind of like the reverse. It's written by Shelley Hyde, and she ended up under different, this is a pseudonym from what she actually wrote. That she didn't write many books under this name, maybe just this. She wrote tons of science fiction books under a totally different name, just from me digging to try to find out about the rights. And what's cool about it is there's one, and it's not, they don't all get it at the same time, so it's not like instant. So there's one woman working in a science lab, and this is all happening over like a 48-hour period. So it's like a virus movie, like you're watching Virus and you're charting the virus, and they're cordoning people off, and other times, and they don't know it's all women, it takes a while. But there's this one woman working in the lab, and she's literally racing against the clock to try to cure it herself before she turns into some animalistic thing herself. And it's, which is also exciting. And just some of the characters, some of it is so vicious and so gnarly that I was like, damn, this would be such a fucking good little movie. But you know, you never know, maybe in time it could happen, or maybe somebody wealthier than me, like a company.
I was going to say, there's a Studio Book Scout listening to
And
this
that's
right
fine.
now that just got the rights. Paramount has
thank
it now.
me.
Sorry.
It might be too nasty for them though, because that's the thing. This is very much a 70s movie, not a contemporary one, and if done well. And so you know, you could, of course, the concept's great of people going crazy, but it just has some images, and I really I wouldn't talk about it if I didn't want to share love, because I do want people to read this, because it really is a very neat little novel, and like, you know, you could read in 2 sittings kind of book. So that is Shelley Hyde's Blood Fever. Look at antique stores. For those with used bookstores near them, I would start there just in case, if you get lucky, you know, an out of print book like that.
Wow, that one, yeah, that is a beautiful,
Such a
beautiful
cool
cover.
idea.
Okay, my next one is a comic, and this is by Dark Horse. I don't even think I ever mentioned on the show that it was announced that I'm doing a Dark Horse comic. Hey guys, that was a cool announcement from this year.
Nice.
I'm doing a Dark Horse comic that comes out next fall called Barstow. But in the meantime, I have been reading a ton of comics as I've been writing it, and so I read Where Monsters Lie. This is a Dark Horse comic by Kyle Starks. And this one, I'm going to say it, and it sounds so absolutely ludicrous, and that's what makes it so wonderful. It is about a gated community, a private gated community that is inhabited entirely by serial killers. And they basically come here to retire. And it's a couple of different families. And it's not like they're all different types of serial killers. So like one house is like the crazy guy who dresses up like a clown and uses a flamethrower, and, you know, just the over the top terrifier clown. Like Art the Clown has a house. And then the next house over is the woman with the 2 not bright sons who wear sacks on their head and kill peoples with chainsaws. And then 2 houses over are the redneck torture family. And then the house next to it is a perfectly normal looking guy who is the most sadistic of all of them. And then the woman who carries around a puppet, but the puppet kills people. And so it's like a whole neighborhood inhabited by like retired serial killers. And it's very private, and they keep to themselves, and it's how they stay off the grid. And one day a group of kids are like, I wonder what's on the other side of this fence. Yeah, I've always wondered myself. We've lived here for years. I never knew. And they break into the town. And then it just explodes from there. It's got notes of Devil's Rejects. When I was looking at other people's reviews of it, people were saying like it's Cabin in the Woods meets Tucker and Dale meets Devil's Rejects, where it is this, it's funny. It is so funny and so self-aware of all the horror tropes. I can see the Cabin in the Woods because it's basically like somebody went through every horror film and figured out what the serial killer tropes are and then plopped them all in a neighborhood together. It's great. I love this. Like watching them like manicure lawns and take out their trash and argue about, you know, what day trash pickup is and things like that. It was hilarious. And so I ended up picking up the collected volume of this, which I think has like the first 4 or 5 issues in it. But this kept going, and I'm going to keep going with it. This was by far one of my favorite reads of the year. Just absolutely wrong in every sense. Hyper bloody, so brutal, but hilarious. This is Where Monsters Lie from Dark Horse by Kyle Starks.
That's funny because I woke up this morning and I sometimes will scroll X. I guess I'm still not used to calling it that, Twitter. And the first thing I saw was a video of John Wayne Gacy in just casual conversation from when his time in jail with some reporter. And he's like, being very critical of other serial killers and talking about it's very snobby and like, oh yeah, I mean Dahmer, I mean he's crazy. Like, and I'm just listening to this like going, what the hell? You're a guy dressed as a clown and killed boys and buried them in your house. Like, it's so weird when you hear these people like almost like a shared universe is just too bizarre for me.
Yeah. So that's what this is, but if it was in the vein of like a Cabin in the Woods or like a Tucker and Dale, it's very fun.
Less disgusting because they aren't real killers. Which is good. Okay, my favorite thing I read this year, bar none, I just posted about it, and it's not horror per se, but I want to recommend it. It is this called Blood of the Virgin, and it won't be for everyone. This is a collected work, so they were single comics called Cricket, I believe, by a comic artist from out here called Sammy Harcum. And this is set in the 1971. It's about an editor working for basically a Corman studio. It's almost exactly is Corman model, and he's trying to get a leg up, trying to get into directing a film. They're making a film called Blood of the Virgin, and it's not the only horror really is the thing they're making. Everything else is just about working on sets and who you meet, and it's probably closer to something like Babylon but set in the 60s, but like way more my bag than Babylon. Like I every time I picked it up I was like, did somebody write this for me? Like, did somebody literally just make me this? And then I read about it, and this is 14 years in the making. He's been working on this.
Wow.
So those issues were spanning 14 years, and you wouldn't be able to tell from reading through. But like when I say it feels just for me, he's married to a New Zealand woman who and they have a baby, and he's really struggling with that. Their home life is a real struggle. And then at one point she goes back to New Zealand, and there's a whole issue set in New Zealand where she's like on the farm and not sure if she wants to return to her husband who's like trying to work on movies. I mean, I was reading this thing going, Jesus Christ, this is so fucking rad. It's just terrific. And really just excited to learn more about what else he has done. I believe he is one of the original co-owners who actually owned the building of the Cinefamily Silent Theater for a period, because the family, I assume, is the Harkums, but like Harkum Theater chain or whatever. That part I'm guessing it, but either way, I posted about loving it, and he actually wrote on my post saying big fan of yours, and I was like, oh, so that's cool.
Oh,
that's to the show. I don't know.
That I put that on my Christmas list.
Yeah.
Like every year my mom asks me for like a Christmas list, and I hand her the most fucked up list of media ever, and she's reading it. She's like, Blood of a Virgin, and I'm like, supposed to be great.
Yeah,
Mom.
And it's very non-horror, but I do think you would still think it's really cool. It has this one issue right in the middle because all of it's following that story, and there's one issue it's all black and white, and then in the middle there's one full issue, like 30 pages in color, and it's set like 80 years earlier, like 1925, some cowboy who comes to Hollywood. He's just a cowboy, comes to Hollywood to try to make it. And it charts the entire flow of somebody like going to and it's so brilliant. Like, it's better than Babylon, that one comic, but like much more cynical. And I don't know, it's just cool. Cool when you read things that are totally your interest, not necessarily horror, but if people are into that kind of thing, they will dig Blood of the Virgin. Very cool. What is your number one? Will we have a shared number one?
I assume so.
What is your favorite TV series? Yes.
House of Usher. Yeah. This was just outstanding.
And for the record, we pivoted, just so people understand, because there was some talk a couple weeks ago that we were going to just do a top 10 mixture of things. And a couple weeks ago, me and Bekah were like, you know what? Let's keep to movies. So we give.
Let's give 10 movies a shot, because we knew we wanted to get a lot of independent and underseen stuff on the list as well. And I have a feeling everybody knows of House of Usher at this point. But yeah,
you think so, but sometimes I think maybe they get put off by one of the other shows and then they don't come back to it. I think this is one of his best things he's done.
I would say it is the best thing he's done.
So strong. Like Bruce Greenwood in this gives one of the best performances of the year, and he was a replacement for an actor who got fired, and he comes in and as Usher just kills it.
It's so captivating. Like, there was never a character that I felt put off by. There was never a time that I wasn't interested in what happened. It was just, I really enjoyed this show. It was so visually tantalizing.
Have you heard the negative about it? A lot of people who didn't keep watching struggled with them not being likable characters. So
they're terrible characters,
right? Which is the fun. It's exactly like the show that just finished with Brian Cox. That every time I try to remember it, I forget the title. But like about a wealthy family. Like, once you get past that, it becomes fascinating.
I don't know. Like, I love The Righteous Gemstones, and everybody's horrible in that. Like, Schmidt Schitt's Creek I used to watch all the time, and those were all, I mean, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like, I love the shows where everybody is terrible.
Yeah, and that's what this
So
is.
this I was
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, and everyone's
So
good
yeah.
in it. Each episode was basically the death of one of his children as
Mhm.
he's losing his empire for reasons that lie in the past. And I wouldn't want to say, but the most brilliant thing it does, outside of being brilliantly acted, great cast, really great, right? It makes Poe feel completely relevant, and that's
Oh my
very
gosh, yeah.
hard to do. It feels
That's the
contemporary.
biggest
Yeah,
thing. So what that was my biggest thing is Poe, when you read, it feels stodgy. It feels difficult to update. And this did it
yeah.
flawlessly.
By just giving you just enough of the poetic elements of it, but mixed with a modern take on the fables themselves. And it's really, I just,
Yeah.
if this was in the main chart, it'd be in the top 3 for sure. It's
Mhm.
just that strong.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely, I think it's in one of his top 2 film TV projects so far to me, like right up there. So
Totally.
great stuff.
Okay. So
Um,
those are our 5 not films.
not
Okay.
films.
So let's
Quick bathroom
shall we?
break.
Quick bathroom break, and
Okay.
then let's
So
come back and do this.
all right, welcome back. Here we go. We are going to count down our top 10 horror films of 2023. We will, as always, be enacting the Bromley rule, named after Sir Patrick Bromley from F This Movie, who probably this exists on many other places, but he's the one we lifted it from, so it doesn't.
The Bromley
It's
rule.
the Bromley rule, which just means that if you're placing something that somebody else happens to have higher, you will table that conversation until it's placed higher, and then you'll both talk about it. Just so for the sake of time, we're not repeating ourselves. So that's the only rule. Let's talk just general. How'd you feel putting a 10 together? I ended up being a lot happier with my, like, feeling really good about a 10, but couldn't have done a 20, unlike other years where I could have easily done a 20.
I think I would have struggled with a 20
Yeah.
as well. I was my top 4 were like 100%. These were my 4 best films of the year. And then amidst all of the others, it was kind of, it could be at 5, it could be at 10. Like, it was just like they all just kind of were there in a lump. It wasn't very layered for me like it usually is. And yeah, this year, at least compared to last year, felt a little bit lighter. Last year,
for sure. Yeah.
Last year I was fighting, I had so many titles that it was a struggle to make my top 10. This year it was not a struggle to make the top 10, and I did not have as many cast-offs as I did previous years.
Yeah, even though we watched a lot of films, I definitely felt it was a weaker year, but that doesn't mean that the ones we're about to talk to are weak. I mean, more like when of the 75 movies, I might have watched the bottom 45 are all kind of like, versus some years, but on the plus side, horror absolutely dominated at the box office again this year. Did killer movies like from Saw X to, just movies that
Scream 6,
are buoying.
The new Nun film.
So they might not
great.
be on the list, but they are all great signs of what we all do, and our love of this genre continuing to be something that is always profitable. But more importantly, it's just that people want it. People like watching these movies, and we're part of that. So we're gonna do it and see where we go.
We should also say these are our personal fave movies. If I was to make a list of the 10 most historically important films that came out this year, it would be vastly different.
Hard to do in the same year too. Hard to ever do that historically. It's always
thinking like
objective.
What it did for box office, or like what trend it buffed, or things like that. Or if I was to make a list of the 10 best made horror films of the year, it would be completely different. This is our personal favorites, which means you get a lot of weirdness in there because we tend to have pretty eclectic
it's
tastes.
About I would have quit podcasting a year into it if it was about like, this is the top 10 movies that you like. I do not care about that kind of commentary personally. I like hey, I might turn you on to one movie you haven't seen in my top 10, and cool. So
we used to make those lists when we were doing the Blumhouse website, where we would do like the 10 best horror films of the year, and it was always kind of, you had to pick kind of the biggest hits of the year. And that it never excited me as much as, okay, here's the weird shit that you might have missed. And that's where I'm definitely rooting myself this year.
So we are going to start with 10. So again, if once you say the title, if the other person has it higher, we'll table it. I think the most interesting thing about us doing this, though, it tends to be guessing how many we'll have in common, because we've had a couple years where we have very few in common, which always surprises
Yeah.
me given that we see a lot of the bigger ones together.
Together.
So
We see most movies in the theater we
yeah,
go to together.
I don't know if last year was like two or
Okay.
three, but I think it was around two or three last year, maybe only
I think we
two.
had 3
It
last
wasn't a
year. How
lot.
many do you want to guess this
I'm
year?
guessing, because of the kind of year it is, I'm gonna guess three.
I'm going to go 4.
Yeah, it's not going to be a
I'm
lot,
going to guess
because I think some of the weird
4
ones aren't going to be the same,
same.
and then a couple of the big ones definitely will be. But I'd be shocked if we have them in the same place. Again, who knows? Well,
I would
let's
too.
find out. But so okay,
But
so we're both guessing
I'm
3
going
and
to go
4.
higher.
Okay.
You said 3. I'm going to say 4. You know what? Just to be wild, I'm going to say 5.
Okay, so
I'm gonna be baller move here. I'm gonna say that we have 5 this
so
time.
no one wins
Half
if
of
it's
our
4.
list.
If it's 3 and below, I win. If it's 5 and above, you win.
5 and above, I take it. Okay.
Okay, so let's do it. Who wants to do 10? Do you want to?
Well, I'm gonna kick off one that I don't think is gonna be on your list.
Okay.
But because I think that there were other films that spoke to you more, but I love my Lovecraft in any form, and I had a blast with this one, and that is Suitable Flesh at my number 10 spot, directed by Joe Lynch. And I had seen, because this was kind of a sister project to Glorious, where they used the same team, they shot in the same town, it's the same production company, AMP. And so while I was shooting Glorious, they were in prep for this. So my little team, like as we're wrapping Glorious, they're spending their evenings doing like the line budgets on Suitable Flesh. So I got to see it kind of from the ground up as they were going with it. And seeing, this script had been floating around for a really long time. Like back, Stuart Gordon was supposed to direct it. It's been floating around for that long. And then seeing kind of the spin that Joe Lynch put on it, how they updated it, what they did to it, how they took a frankly stodgy story by Lovecraft about 2 very academic-y dudes being seduced and stuff like that. It's, seeing the modern day twist that they took on it and how they still really preserve the Lovecraftian side, and that it does feel like a love letter to Stuart Gordon.
And
I
90s,
had a blast.
yeah, erotic thriller.
90s erotic thrillers
sure.
And Stuart Gordon all the way.
Yes.
And so
Body
this is
movie, for those who you don't know. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a total Lovecraftian body swap. This is my fave Joe Lynch film so far.
I agree with that. It's just off my list, but not by much. It is a lot of fun, and I think he did a good job with the energy of it. And a couple of the performances are super interesting too. I really like the young guy in it. He would surprise me just as a performance. Yeah, it would pair very well with my number 10, like perfect pairing, because it's also about sex basically. And that was one of the first films I saw this year, called Candyland. And I don't know if you saw this one yet or not. I don't recall.
I didn't, and I saw this pop up on other people's top 10 lists.
It was one of the first films. It was the first film I liked this year. Like when I was like, whoa, did not expect that, because it opens like with this great like tracking shot of a truck stop and the kind of girl passing other girls, getting in the truck, taking off her clothes, and like quite explicitly fucking a trucker. And you're like, okay, I didn't know we made movies like this anymore. So it's kind of a bit like X, in that it's a throwback. It's definitely has the feeling, without using cheesy filters, of a 70s truck stop movie. And it's all set up, this one truck stop and an adjoining motel in the middle of nowhere in the desert. This group of 4 friends who are also all prostitutes at this truck stop, and there's a madame who works there as well. And it's a very different kind of world than just a typical prostitution kind of thing, because you're talking bathrooms, back of trucks, like it's much more dangerous, and they outline the dangers to it. And one of them is a guy, Owen Campbell, who's also from X and he's been in Super Dark Times, really interesting actor, popping up in a lot of best stuff. And he turns gay tricks, and he's really good in this. And William Baldwin enters this movie at one point as this really kind of, not a terror, he's bad in some ways, like sheriff, but in other ways he's not as bad as some of the characters in this. Very interesting movie. But Olivia Luccardi is a part of this religious cult that lives nearby, that happens to stop by here. And they're condemning all of this prostitution, and they're handing out flyers saying, the end of the world's coming, blah, blah, blah. And at some point she runs away from that cult and stores in with these people. And they basically say, you can stay here, but you got to turn tricks if you stay here, because this isn't free rent. So here's this person always clinging to this cross that she always has with her. And if you don't want to know any more about this movie, this would be the moment to stop. But I'll tell you, there's no way I can sell it otherwise. What we quickly find out, so spoiler from this moment on for the next few seconds, what we find out is that cross opens up to be a dagger, and it becomes a slasher film where she stabs to death many different men who are trying to have sex with her, and it becomes a pretty crazy slasher movie set in this world. And it's kind of fucking cool. And it's actually like when I first started, I really liked it and kind of forgot about it when I was doing this list. And then a couple days ago, I was like, you know what? This is actually a really cool, original feeling, very grindhouse world that the characters are in. One of them is Josh Brolin's daughter, Eden Brolin. She's one of the
Mm-hmm.
prosecutors. She's really good in it. It's just clever and fun. And there's another twist to come. Like, that's what's cool about it. Even though she's doing that, there's one more like surprise coming in the movie. So it just was a cool surprise for those who haven't seen it. It's streaming, and it just felt a little bit racier than most movies in this subgenre, and that to me is always a sweet relief given how everything looks the same sometimes. So that is Candyland.
Love it. That's a really good addition because that is one that I don't think a lot of people have seen this year.
Yeah, and it's got fun
Okay.
stuff.
Drifting into my number 9 spot. This is one, so I'll also refine our rules here. Festivals make it difficult to tell what comes out specific years. So sometimes we'll go by festivals if we happen to see it there, but then sometimes we'll go by the date that it does its more widespread release. So this one played festivals in 2022, but it did not come out until it released on Peacock in top of 2023. And that is Sick.
Yeah, I think that's
directed
totally fine.
by, Sick, directed by John Himes. This did not come out until January 2023. And this was one of my first watches of the year. If memory serves, I watched this during the holiday break last year and absolutely loved it. It is, if somebody had told me it's a pandemic slasher, I would have been like, oh my God, I don't want to watch any more pandemic movies. That's like the last thing anybody wants to watch at this point. We don't want to relive this. That was really good. It is about a group of people. It actually opens with a really cool cold open with a guy at college who is killed, and it's like a really tight cold open. But then we go to these two best friends who have decided to go to one of their secluded lake houses and quarantine together. And they get there and they start getting these really weird messages from an unknown number. And later visitors start arriving and they realize that it's friends that they didn't know were coming, that one of them invited. And it becomes this whole question of, oh my God, you could contaminate us. And then other things start happening and they realize that someone else is in the house with them. This was just, it was a pandemic film, but it was a good slasher. And that's what I really liked about it. It functioned very much as a slasher on its own accord. It could have just been two friends staying at a guest house and one of their boyfriends shows up and they realize somebody else is in the house. You wouldn't have had to have masks in the quarantine backdrop. So it wasn't reliant on the pandemic, but it was just a good slasher in itself. And this is still available on Peacock.
Yeah, this is particularly notable for its direction. Like, Himes directs the shit out of it. It is so, give him a Scream movie because he can make things move, Very, very well directed. And this
very tiny cast for the most of it. For the most of it, it's just 3 people and a maybe killer because you don't really know where they are or who they are for the first part of the movie. And it is just compelling even with 3 people.
And a very humorous kind of cameo role from Jane Addams from Happiness.
Yes.
She had some funny lines that I was not expecting her to be that funny in the slasher movie suddenly. Very amusing. But just that one only just missed off too. It was kind of close to the list for me. Number 9 is the one you were just alluding to having just watched. So we'll both talk about this. This is a film called Venus, directed by Juan Balaguero, who is one of the directors of Rec, from Spain, from Madrid. I'll give the quick rundown of the story and then we'll both talk about what we thought. It opens with a go-go dancer who is rocking and rolling at a nightclub. She leaves. She clearly has some sort of plan in place to rip off a duffel bag full of, what we assume is drugs or money, whatever it's going to be. In that moment,
they're blue pills.
Yeah, blue pills, and she has to get out of there. And a security guard kind of gets in her way. She gets injured. It's all pretty intense, really beautifully shot. And she goes to this apartment complex, kind of it's similar to another apartment complex in movies that we'll be talking about, I suspect, on this list. And her sister, who also has a kid, and they're very strange, she's going to kind of hole up there. So half of this is a crime film. Initially you are just in a crime genre film, kind of in a From Dusk Till Dawn type switcheroo, as we like.
I did just read blue pills are usually fentanyl.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So wait. So what is the plus of fentanyl? I understand when fentanyl is on things and cut with it, people OD. So what is? Why would somebody want fentanyl? What is the? I wonder what
I think in proper dosages, it's probably like, so like a really good opiate, but it's
Okay.
easy to OD
We
on.
need an
I
expert.
don't, you're asking me.
We
That's
need a good
great.
drug expert. She goes to this building, and when this movie to me just gets so interesting is when it basically becomes the best version of, well, outside of Spider's Labyrinth, it should be the third Argento witch trilogy, because
Yeah.
once you get in there, somewhere between that and Salem's, what's the Rob Zombie one?
Lords of
Lords of Salem
Salem.
has a lot of
Yeah.
similarities to that, with these older elderly women in this house. And there's just like one sequence in particular where it goes full fucking all the way to the cosmic Lovecraft Argento mixture, and it's like, to me, that was like one of the highlights of the year horror wise, was just that
Yeah.
sequence. A lot of this movie isn't horror, a lot of it is a crime film and kind of girl on the run, but when it switches, I really thought this was cool. But I am curious to hear what you thought, because I thought you'd love this one.
I did like this one a lot. It didn't make my top 10 list because the majority of it was a crime drama.
Yeah.
And then it turned into a ghost story for a stretch. Like there was a solid hour of it being a ghost story. And then the last 30 minutes I fucking loved, because the last 30 minutes were a pure Lovecraftian mixed with the best Argento film never made.
Yeah.
And the whole servant stuff versus the mystery, like it was just fascinating, because it also had this Hellraiser feel to it.
Totally. I was thinking that at one point, like, oh, this, I'd be curious to see what he, like, if Hellraiser could divorce itself from the American and British, or and say, hey, let's just make Hellraiser stories in other countries.
Yeah,
this would be a great Hellraiser story.
This would totally. Yeah. It felt like one of the Hellraiser comics where they are completely divorced from Hellraiser, from Pinhead, and they're just kind of, it's Hellraiser taking place in various places. That's what this feels like. Is like if somebody had opened a box in a random apartment building in Madrid, and it kind of explodes slowly throughout the movie as the girl is trying to hide from these criminals who are hunting her down for literally having a duffel bag full of what we now know is fentanyl.
Yeah.
And
she's great in it too. Esther Exposito. I wasn't really aware of it. It's one of those like star making kind of, whoa, who is this person? This is a fun role. Yeah.
The same guy who directed Wreck.
Yeah,
right?
One of the Wreck directors. Yeah. He's directed most of the better ones since, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a couple guys, and we talked about one of the other ones who did like Sister Death and stuff. But this is still criminally underwatched. Like, not many people are talking about it yet.
And what I did love about this is how clever the plot was, where it's not just a crime heist. It's a crime heist while this thing is also happening. And this thing is happening in the background of this crime heist throughout most of the movie until the last half an hour. And then they collide. Yeah. It was very cleverly orchestrated.
Yeah, a really cool film if someone's looking for something surprising. And I will say a theme of, I don't know if it's just the year or my list, is a lot of genre mashing up happening this year, like just tons. Maybe it's a sign that people don't want to just try to approach the genre head on with just one thing at the moment, because there's so many of these will have those kind of surprises.
Okay. Taking us to my number 8. I just watched this week and I didn't talk about it up top because I knew it was going to be on my list. And that is Last Voyage of the Demeter.
Oh, I was I actually regret, because this got slammed by a lot of people,
It did.
But I wish this could be my number 10. I wanted Kane, because it is like right around that. It is a very surprisingly really well made piece of film.
Right?
No, it is. And the monster stuff's great from start to end. The monster stuff. Yeah.
So legit, I had read all these negative reviews on it. And a lot of times if I read a lot of negative reviews, I'll just be like, I'll see it when it's free. I'll see it when it comes to Amazon Prime. I'll still see it eventually because I'm going to watch everything. I'm just not going to pay $7.99 to rent it right away. And so I hadn't watched this right when it released. And then after I started thinking about it, I was like, I really want to watch it for this. So I decided to watch it 2 nights ago. Was fucking captivating.
I knew when I saw this in the theater
how much I loved this.
I knew when I was watching in the theater, I was sitting there going, oh, Bekah would have loved this, because the monster is one of the best monsters I've seen, like best versions of Nosferatu I've seen ever, because it's creepy, grotesque, nothing human, nothing likable, just this thing coming for you. I think people were critical, and there was moments when I was watching where some of just the story and some of the character stuff was like, not great always, but the filmmaking was always great, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it was so well done, which, that boat was a set, and
Yeah.
how they used it and how they made it feel real. And it was just, I thought it was so well done. I get a lot of people might not like this because it is also a period piece. It is 1890 something. When was Dracula's original novel? 1897 or
Hmm.
something like that. And this is literally a chapter of Dracula's novel, which just says that, there was a boat that was transporting this, casket, and everybody on the boat died. And the captain's log details like everybody getting sick and people going crazy and something feeding on them. And so taking that chapter and then turning it into, this is the voyage of taking Dracula from his homeland and bringing him to London. And the characters figuring out what's going on along the way. I just thought this was amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
they're out at open ocean and nothing can leave the boat. It's just them there, and they can't figure out where he's hiding. And even when, they've destroyed his coffin, they still can't figure out where he's hiding and where he's hiding during the daytime. And they're already sick, and their food, that's the very first thing. He destroys all of the animals on board because they take animals with them so that they can, eat the chickens along the way and stuff like that. And the very first couple of nights on the voyage, he drains all the animals. And so then they have no food. And just seeing the desperation of the voyage combined with something that is feeding on them. This is great. It's so well shot. So yeah, this is Andre Overdahl. I'm saying the name wrong. But yeah, I was surprised about this. Do not listen to any of the reviews. This was, if you're, if you can get around the period thing, this was great.
Yeah, I mean, he directed Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is still one of the great movies of the last, like, decade horror wise. And I
Yep.
just think I think it's so well directed, and it is interesting. I think time will be on that one side because I think a lot of the maybe initial reactions it'll be more like a Dracula that you go back to and dig.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of most bummed though because if it didn't do well, because at the very end, without giving it away, there is a possibility of what would have been a sequel that I would have very
Yep.
much liked to have watched. And as the story would have continued, and I'm like, if it didn't make money, I guess we'll never see it. But maybe we'll see. Okay, my number one, number eight. I was going to jump to number one.
I was gonna say, where are you
My
going,
number one,
Kane?
number eight, was a movie that at times I was mixed on, but like there's so much I like about it that I had to put it in, and that's number eight, Cobweb, by Sam Bowden, who made Marianne. And I get some of the criticism, especially of the end. And this, again, we're talking about genre mashups. This hits many different genres, but I think in the long run, this is going to be a bit of a Halloween classic that people will dust off every Halloween because it's set at Halloween and it has so many great sequences and really creepy setup. Young boy, and you basically are his parents, played by Lizzie Kaplan and Anthony Starr. You're basically assuming they're like child abductors and they're really fucked up and hiding secrets. You're trying to work it out as you're watching it, but don't seem good.
You know that they've
Yeah.
got something in the basement and
Yes.
that they don't want him to leave the house. It feels very oh gosh, people under the stairs.
Yeah, mixed with a little bit
Yeah.
of the one from last year, Black Phone kind of thing. And then he
Mm-hmm.
starts talking to like almost an imaginary friend, somebody in a wall, which you just assume is a ghost. And so you think you're watching a ghost film that's also with like stepfather type vibes of the parents, and then it takes such a crazy turn. And I'm not going to even ruin it because there's just no point for anyone who hasn't seen it. And so where you go with that turn will depend on where you fall in this film. Has Cleopatra Coleman also playing his teacher, and the teacher is the one person who's kind of worried about him, and he's always drawing things, and there's pumpkin patches in the yard, and there's just so much iconography that to me makes this, and it really does feel like an attempt, which is hard to do, and I think it's one of the best examples of a modern day grim fairy tale but set in our world.
Oh yeah.
It really feels like a grim story, and it's because it's very dark from start to end. I really like that. There's things along the way, like even while I was watching, because I watched with other people, where I'd be like, wait, what about trying to pick holes, but then I'd be like, you know what, but I'm also enjoying it, so I don't care. Written by Chris Thomas Devlin, who we befriended when we were at the Seattle
Make
Make
believe
Believe, yeah, Billy
festival.
Ray's, and we got to
Mhm.
meet him and be on a panel and stuff. And when I was watching it, I don't think I knew he wrote it. So well done. I think this movie will have kind of like a nice arc to it. I think this will become something that people watch quite often every
I
Halloween.
A lot of people that
Yeah,
really loved this. I was one of those who was kind of hung up on some of the
yeah,
inconsistencies. But that said, the whole monster and mythos behind
Yeah.
it were really fun and
And
really
the good thing
tight.
about the holes that people like, if we do, often when you come back a couple years later and watch a movie, you're not no longer thinking that way because you've already
Mhm.
done it. So you can sometimes just enjoy it for being a crazy, wild film, you know? And I like that about movies, that they don't always just stay put, you know? But anyway, number 8 was
Okay.
Cobweb.
Going to my number 7, which I have an inkling is higher on your list. Talk to me.
Higher.
Figured.
So far that's our first
That's our
first in common.
first. I'm making a note.
First in common will be discussed soon.
Okay, what's your 7?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we just keep going. 70 for me. It was floating between 7 and 10, but I just love this filmmaker so much. That's Infinity Pool. It's, it's nowhere near to me as good as Possessor. Possessor was my number one movie that year, one of my favorite of the decade so far, to be honest. But it was completely original. I've never seen a movie quite like it. Everyone's good in it. It looks great. It's so weird. I mean, it's set on a tropical island. Alexander Skarsgård and Cleopatra Coleman, who was just in the last movie, so 2 in a row. I think she's the only person on 2 films on my list. She's very rich. He's a struggling kind of, I'd say, actually failed writer, not even failing. And they're on this perfect beach, and then they meet Mia Goth, which obviously is always a bad thing in movies. Her and her boyfriend, and they go into this kind of he goes into this kind of world of hedonism, and then it gets so bonkers. Like, it really goes into like it's probably closer to a science fiction, but with a lot of depravity. So that's what kind of makes it
Mm-hmm.
horror. But it's probably a bit more sci-fi in its concept, which is, and I'm, it's been out long enough to say, they do something unthinkable and terrible, and they kill a local person accidentally. And how are we ever going to get out of it? And then they're basically told, well, you need to be executed in this country to appease the locals. But if you have enough money, they can make a double of you and kill that instead, and you're free to go. And so it becomes this little sci-fi twist that you can create a double. And probably the funniest scene of the year in any movie, even though it's really dark, but you're actually laughing, is them watching the execution of their double, and you're laughing because it's so insane.
Because they're
They're cheering.
cheering.
It's pretty funny. It's a very fucked up movie, very sexual, but like I am so in for this director's just this vision that he's like of the, and this one was actually meant to be made before Possessor, so it was actually something he had to kind of come back to get made because he couldn't get it made,
Ah.
which makes sense because it is a little harder to sell, I think, as a concept compared. But what's really memorable is just Mia Goth in this movie saying the name James and following him around and taunting him. It's quite, I can hear it in the recesses of my brain. And well,
It sounds
yeah,
like a British ghost. It's
yes,
the only way, whatever you would think a British ghost screaming would sound like, it's that. And it was just so amazing to
because
hear
it's her
her
real voice.
regular.
Yeah, it's her
Yeah.
real voice in this one, which can be a little can throw you off a little bit. But it's a very interesting film, and it could have floated anywhere in the latter half of my list, but definitely a director to keep watching.
Number 6 for me. This is another one that was kind of critically mixed, but I was such a huge personal fan
Yeah.
of, and that is Renfield by Chris McKay.
Well, in my top 5, so it didn't make here on only. I think the only reason it's not here is because it would probably make my top 5 comedies of the year because it to me was such a funny comedy. But what I did note
Yeah.
when we did our 5 thing before, my other 5 asterisks was Nicolas Cage in Renfield, because to
Mhm.
me, I feel like people are sleeping on him giving one of the best performances of the year and one of the most fun versions of Dracula we'll ever see.
I do not know what people's issues were with this movie because we saw the press screening
Yeah,
of this and it was outlandishly crazy. People were just losing it. And
so
it's the
funny.
mix of comedy and Nick Cage and gore and how over the top, and he beats a man to death with his own arm at one point. It's just wild, and how like contemporary it is with the whole kind of self-care and emotional and empowerment thing versus Nicolas Cage as this literal vampire. I thought this movie was brilliant. So I had a blast with it. This is the only one on my list that I have watched twice so far this year.
Yeah.
I watched this a second time several months. It was when the Blu-ray released. I watched it a second time and thought it was great again. I let my daughter watch it with me and she thought it was hilarious. So yeah, I wish this had performed better box office wise, because it would have kind of made a better path for horror comedies going forward, which are
Yeah.
always a hard sell. But yeah, I thought it was brilliant. So well done, Chris McKay. I had a blast
It
with it.
almost feels like they shouldn't even try for horror comedy. It should just be, it's a great comedy that happens to have horror characters,
Horror
but it's
elements.
never really trying to like scare you. It's about being funny and absurd, and especially the
Mhm.
character with his like sweater, Renfield wearing his sweater and stuff. Like that stuff's just very funny.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It is so fun.
It,
Him
it,
decorating his apartment and putting little quotes everywhere. It's just so
it's
fun.
another. I mean, that's the hard thing with movies in their. I feel bad for the directors because some movies in their moment don't do well and or even critically well. But 5 years from now, everyone is gonna be looking back at Nick Cage movies. They're gonna get to this and they're gonna be like, "How did we not see Renfield?" You can already see the list, and because it's
Hilarious.
him just fully committed. So,
Yeah.
and the best thing they did, and we talked about this, is they cut this little Universal. They cut him into Universal old horror movies in black
The
and white.
old
And
it was
it's so
Nosferatu
cool.
and then it
Yeah.
goes into Werner
Oh,
Herzog.
it's so
It's
cool to
amazing
see.
how flawless it
That's a
is.
very clever idea. And we had him on the show, but it really is
Mhm.
fun. My number 6 is very controversial. This is one that wasn't on my list till yesterday. And I realized, oh, I'd be lying if I didn't say it wasn't one of the most interesting things. But for a lot of people, this will be one of those ones they might get upset about. That is Beau is Not Afraid by Ari Aster. This is
Mm.
a 3-hour movie.
Nope, didn't see it.
Here's the thing. Well, number one, you'll understand when I've told. I think when I mentioned to you what it is, what it feels like. It feels like a living embodiment of a Dan Clowes graphic novel, and you know how I feel about those. They're like my
Yes.
favorite graphic novel maker artist. He did Ghost World, but that's a much more realistic thing. This feels like they captured, and I'm sure Aster's a fan. You could just feel it in everything. The thing about this movie is I almost want to break it into pieces to place it. Like, I'm not kidding. If I was just the first hour, I think it would be number one on my list. The first hour is so great. So it's like a massive panic attack, anxiety attack as you meet this Joaquin Phoenix character who is a total mama's boy, totally living in a shell, is scared of the outside world, doesn't even want to cross the street to get medication, doesn't want to go outside his door, but he has to. And it's like the apocalypse is happening around him. But that's how it feels. They basically create how he feels. It's probably not how the world is, but it's how he feels. And it's really terrifying and intense, and it's just so well done. Like, it's nonstop. I would definitely think if you just turn on one night just saying to yourself, I'm gonna only watch the first 45 minutes to see how I feel, you should do that, because I think you're gonna love that part. The second in the middle of this movie, it becomes this, there's more of this folktale and just very, very big swing filmmaking, but I found myself much less just interested in a lot of that part. And then at the end, they bring Parker Posey in, and suddenly it becomes fucking great again for like a good 40 minutes. So when you're dealing with 3-hour movies, it's hard to talk about, but I think it is a nightmare movie, and I think it's a Kafka movie, like one of the most pure like Kafka type movies. And I want people to check it out if they didn't, because I think it's more interesting than Midsummer. I'm not saying it's a better movie. Midsummer is obviously a huge cult hit, but this is more interesting because this is not this is going to be his weird. This will be his Southland Tales. This will be the
Mhm.
thing that takes a while for people to click on. Joaquin's great in it. Nathan Lane's good. Patty LaPone's really good. And then Parker
I
Posey goes,
love
yeah.
Patty
He
LaPone
plays the
in
mom.
anything.
But it's so weird. Like, there is something I'm not even talking about. Something to do with his testicles. Something to do with a thing where he can't have sex because he's worried he'll die, because that's how he was told his father died. So he's living in this like mental. It feels like there's some weird stuff that Aster has gone through in his life that he had to put into this movie, and it feels like a lot of that is coming out. Very strange movie, but like I said, that first hour is just so well made and exciting filmmaking. So whatever Aster does, it's going to be interesting, whether it connects or not. But I'm not sure it needs to be that long. Like, this is one where I'm not, maybe if it was 220, it would have done so much better, versus 3 hours. But I think it was worth bringing up on a list like this, so people are reminded that it does hit some horror stuff.
Okay. Coming into the top 5 now.
Top
At
5
number 5 for me, The Boogeyman.
is literally, like, now it was my 11. It was my 10 until I put on
You're making
Candyland.
me lose our bet.
I am making you
here.
lose our bet, but I'm with you. I still think The Boogeyman's one of the best directed movies of the year.
I thought
Just
this
fan
was
of
so
it.
tight. Rob Savage just knocked this out of the park. I loved the direction. I loved how the scare sequences were orchestrated. I love the mythos. Like, the Boogeyman is such just a generic film concept. And even when you reread the Stephen King short story, it's very much vague. It doesn't really say anything about what's happening. And so building an entire feature film out of the boogeyman. Like there's not a lot there. And so I found the script in itself to be incredibly clever. I found the mythos that it builds around what the boogeyman is, how it functions, how it spreads from person to person, how it selects new victims, how it travels, from closets. Like there's a lot of kind of rule making and biology that has to be involved in it that really fucking worked. And the creature at the end was just fucking awesome. So yeah, I loved this film. Thought that it had some really great scare sequences in it.
Yeah, I wonder if some of the people who didn't like this, because I was surprised. It was one of those movies where you saw negative reviews. You're like, huh. I wonder if there were people watching it at home, not in the theater, because in the theater it played so well.
Yeah, we saw this, I think, opening
Yeah, people were
night.
cheering and
And
standing up,
yeah,
and it
there
just
was cheer. Somebody was like, I remember there was a couple that was like screaming at like,
yeah.
don't do
Oh yeah,
that. Like
no, it was
and there
great.
was guys like at one point when somebody gets punched there was like a group of guys in front of us that stood up and was like, fuck yeah. It was like,
Yeah,
it was the best screening experience that
yeah.
I think we've had
It
this
was
year
really
because it was
high, yeah, up there.
it was a packed crowd at the AMC 16 Burbank and everybody was really engaged.
Yeah, no, really good. My number 5 is not one that will probably be on a lot of people's lists, and if it was, it might be in the 10. So me putting it 5 is really, this is very much about this surprised me. I really liked it and I had fun versus like it's some big movie. But I really want people to see this, and that is that movie I've talked about a bit called All Eyes, directed by the Greenlee brothers.
Oh yeah.
And I started on Tubi. And it's just this, and I don't want to overhype it because then it underdoes what was nice to discover about it, which is it's a small movie, but with a lot of heart. And it's a podcaster, does true crime podcasts, gets kind of disgraced because one of the interview subjects turns out to be a fraud kind of story. And he kind of gives up on his podcasting until he gets a letter from this farmer who says, my wife loved your show. I have a monster in the adjacent field from my house. This is a true story, and I will give you 20 grand if you come talk to me and maybe do a podcast on this, whatever the setup is. And he goes out to the middle of nowhere because he's got nothing to lose. And he basically meets this farmer guy, and they sit around bonding outside fields, drinking beers, waiting for something to happen. And a lot of it is about their relationship. But it does deliver. It's going to go there. But what's surprising in the middle of this film, and I don't like to go too into it because it's the part that really surprised me and I really loved, is the guy is completely wired with booby traps his entire house and everywhere around his house because he thinks monsters going to come. Unfortunately, at some point, our main character kind of gets stuck. And that part of the movie is so fucking fun and funny and like a Evil Dead-y vibe. The closest approximate movie right now, because the setup is Deadstream, right? Like those two really could pair very nicely. They're very different like types of movies, but they have a similar kind of character at their core and are both smaller films that are both really fun. And I just really dig it. I think it's a really cool little movie and makes me excited that people like that are, voices on the rise. So I'm giving it a nice high placement at number 5 on Tubi.
Okay. Heading into my number 4.
Wow. So we still only have one in common. Okay.
Only one in common. I am so
Insane.
losing
Insane.
this year.
Yeah.
I tried, but that's okay because if I lose, it means that we're giving more films exposure, which is what we ultimately want to do. Like, we don't want to make a list of 10. We want to make a list of a bunch of films. And my number 4 is definitely one of the deeper cuts of this year, but one that I just really enjoyed and that I want to give some exposure to. And that is Swallowed by one of our friends, prior guest, Carter Smith.
I really dug this one too. This wasn't in the in my brain right because he actually made 2 films this year, and I really like the other one. The other
Passenger is
great
was
as super well made and really good Kyle Gollner performance. He's making films that aren't quite in the mainstream though, and I can see why maybe because of that, like less people are seeing or talking about them. But yeah, you're right. This one was like very different. It just felt different.
Yeah. So this is Swallowed. This one actually played festivals in 2022 because it played some of the same festivals as Glorious, and I didn't get to see it. And then it released top of 2023. And I just found this film to be absolutely amazing. It is 2 best friends. One of them is leaving for Los Angeles with the intention of becoming a gay porn star. And so it is their last night. They decide to drive across to Canada, and they're going to go drinking. And they're like, you know what? One last night, I'm going to get some money so that I can, fund my trip to LA. I'm going to do a drug run. And so they drive into Canada and they decide to be drug mules so that they can do this one last thing and get some money before he goes off to LA to do gay porn. and they swallow their job is to swallow these little like balloonies and then drive back across the border, and then they recover them when they go to the bathroom on the other side. And there's all of these different kind of gangsters and underground people involved, that it's real shady what they're doing, and they don't ask questions about what's in the baggie. And they drive back across and things start happening, and they realize they get into some trouble. They encounter some rednecky type characters. One realizes that the baggie has likely burst inside of him, and they realize that what they are carrying is not drugs. It is some type of very special, very rare, very disturbing looking insects, which are now inside of him. It gets 10 times worse from there. This movie gets absolutely brutal. It's tiny. I don't think that the cast is probably more than 10 people total, but it feels it's very much like a drug crime movie, but with this very
body horror for
Cronenbergian
sure. Yeah.
bug body horror bend to it. So Swallowed, this movie is one that I have not stopped thinking about this year, that just the acting in it's really good, and how much it's stuck with me is amazing. And it goes way bonkers at the end, and I absolutely love where it goes at the end.
Yeah, it's a really interesting movie. I was really in on that movie when we watched it for that episode. He's on a roll of making interesting work.
Mhm.
I hope he can get back to like getting a budget that allows him like to go for a big swing, because it's got to be
Like a Ruins.
yeah, because he's obviously started there, but like the films he's been making since have all been interesting. So
yeah.
Okay, so my number 4 could also be as high as 1. It's that good. It's a movie that I only would have been talking about at the top of the episode had it, because I saw it this week. It's a movie that's going to be at the top of a lot of people's list, and it'll be at the top of your list when you see it, and that is Godzilla -1. This movie, you haven't had time, and so that's the only reason.
I haven't. I ended up with the ear thing
Yeah.
I was talking about at the top of the show, and we had planned to go see it
A
the
while
Sunday
back,
that
yeah.
it opened, and I didn't get to go because I couldn't hear and I was in a lot of
So
pain.
I won't say too much. I'll say like the closest I could approximate. I feel like it has the similar kind of structure to why Tales from Busan is so good. So in the same way, if you tell me I love Godzilla, but I also have never watched not a single Godzilla movie as a real movie to me. They are fun, and I enjoy watching Godzilla be either cheap and crappy in a suit or big and stupid, but I've never once watched it from start to end as a movie where I'm going to be moved. It feels historic. I kept saying afterwards, like, put this with Oppenheimer. As soon as Oppenheimer ends, you should be watching this movie, because it's set in the same fucking time period. It's like the last day of the war in Japan. Your main character is a kamikaze pilot who is too scared to do it. Like, basically, they're all told to just die, like go crash into something, and he lands his plane pretending there's something wrong with it because he doesn't want to die. And the guy, when people realize that he's been faking it, he's kind of being embarrassed, and then suddenly Godzilla attacks this little island. This is the opening scene, and they have never seen Godzilla before. They're all like shocked, and he's the only him and one other person survive, and he's kind of embarrassed. And then the war's over, but half of Japan's obviously ruined. So it's set in this, and he basically starts to look after this little girl, little baby, that has been left in his care. And so it's a lot of this movie is about learning, like, very quick. They do such a smart job of getting this idea that that Japanese society was like, you aren't important as a person. You are just part of a cog, and now go kill yourself for the greater cause. To no, individuals matter, and individuals can come together for a greater good. A massive shift in the entire concept of what Japan has been, what modern day Japan is. And so they do that in the course of like a 2-hour movie, like the entire shift of that philosophy through these characters. And then the cool thing about this movie, no spoilers, is that at no point is Godzilla empathetic. At no point are you cheering for Godzilla. At no point do you think he's the cool thing. It is from start to end, Godzilla is the bad thing, and we must work together to try to end it. And that is so refreshing to me, because I haven't felt that way in my entire life watching Godzilla in a movie. I always am cheering for Godzilla.
Yeah.
It's like
that's how you do it.
No,
it's
this
like
is so cool.
Godzilla.
It's so cool to watch him, and that's why I said it might be less for your kids, because it's more like a history movie mixed with these scenes. But like, I'm watching this movie, it's like halfway through, I'm like, this is really good. Like, I'm kind of surprised. And there's a city sequence, like it's all set on islands mostly. And suddenly Godzilla rolls into the city in like 1940s Japan, and the music from the old Godzillas drops. The needle drop is is the best moment of the year. Like, the single best moment I felt, like where you could feel the hair on your arm stand up because it was so exciting. It was just like, oh shit, like I'm in a Godzilla movie, and the stakes are like the original. It feels more like the original Jurassic Park did, where dinosaurs were actually scary for a second or intense or whatever. This movie just rules. I'm not going to say anything more else about the story. I've met very few people who aren't finding this to be one of the most rewarding, and just because it's very emotional and just a really great Godzilla movie. So less horror, obviously, because it's a monster movie, but it's not necessarily about being scary. Surprisingly feel good.
I heard that as well, that it did have this Train to Busan kind of uplifting quality to it.
It is terrific, and you will definitely dig it. Not necessarily the kid Godzilla movie for yet, but
I was going to, once I started feeling better, I was going to take Strummer to go see it because he loves Godzilla so much. And I was worried because I'd heard that it was a dialogue heavy
movie. A lot of subtitles.
And he's 7. He can read, not fast. So I was like, okay, that might
they
not
might
be.
There might be a dubbed version out there. I mean, I'm sure when it comes to streaming, I'm sure somebody would make a dubbed version because, it's why not? I don't think you'd lose too much for a younger viewer.
Yeah,
because I like the Miyazaki ones when they're dubbed for kids. They're fine, because they do a good job. I think that's the thing. If you do a good job,
they do a good
You
job.
cast real stars and you make a good movie.
I gotta say, a couple of people who I won't name names, that are directors that we know, work also directing dubs for Netflix. So a lot of times if a movie is coming in dubbed, it's been directed by like a real director who is really trying to make it good on those Netflix ones.
Sometimes,
and there are definitely some of them are great. Like the Conference was one where I didn't even notice it.
There's one where I had to stop. I think I'd watched the first one dubbed not knowing it was in German, which was that show Marianne. And then when I switched to the German, it worked so much better for me. I don't know why. It's just creepier or something. I don't know.
The Rec American dub is the most painful thing I have ever. It's awful. Yeah. I show Rec in my class, and I had to fight to find the original.
That's right. No, version. I remember watching a bit of it.
It's racist. It's bad. So, anyways, it's beside the point. Let's move on to number 3. And number 3, much like Rec, is set in a high-rise apartment building, and that is my number 3, Evil Dead Rise.
I'm gonna have to not pull the Bromley move because my number 3 is Evil Dead Rise.
What? Okay,
finally, we landed somewhere.
2.
A totally rad movie that I rewatched last. It's the only one I rewatched, and I did it last night because I was like, you know what? How is this gonna be? I didn't know if it'd be 3 or 2, or so. I knew it was gonna be around here. And it's just so much fun.
It's so good. This movie just slaps from the moment it starts going. And that is my favorite part, is it is unrelenting. It is just brutal the entire way through. And it is an absolute blast. And it knows what it's doing. Yeah. It knows that it's an Evil Dead, that it should be fun, that it should be jaw-dropping. And the fact that you can pick up Evil Dead and smack it down in the middle of a beautiful high-rise, it just works.
And that it's so dark. I mean, it's real dark with the family stuff because the mother, it goes so dark with some of the things she says. What I love about it, I wrote this down last night. I was like, oh, it's Demons 1, but set in Demons 2. It's the tone of Demons 1, but it's in the setting of Demons 2, which is like about as good as you could hope for a movie. And it also reminded me think about this. It's the only franchise there isn't a bad movie. There is not a bad Evil Dead movie, or even the show. There has not been a bad Evil Dead thing, which is unreal given the tonal shifts from Army of Darkness and this have nothing in common at all tonally, and yet they're all good. They're all
somehow it works. Somehow it can exist as this over the top, very character led comedy to this. Yeah. Like it's very much, they're 2 different franchises in the capacity, but both of them work so well.
And I think that's a testament to when you have the same creators at least involved. Like Robert Tappert has produced all of them. It means that somebody is watching the material, even if they're not. It's not all Raimi, but it's all been watched. I can't wait for whatever the next one, if it's in this world. If Lee Cronin's coming back for another one, he does a great job directing this film. Very good film.
So, okay, number 2 for me, No One Will Save You by Brian Duffield.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, didn't end up making mine. I guess in my brain it's more sci-fi, but I love the way it's made. So I'll let you. I know you love this one.
Oh my gosh. Right. I did. This is my number 2 film of the year. This is one of my ultimate favorite watches. I love Brian Duffield just because I feel like he marries horror and comedy so
Truly
well
does. Yeah.
without making it over the top. There's another horror comedy that almost made my list, but it was so over the top I found it off-putting
Yeah.
almost at times. And I mean, there are horror comedies that I love being over the top, like Renfield, but this one, it's got a subtlety to it that I just found brilliant. And it's a lot of it's in the shooting, like how he is framing the aliens or her discovering the aliens. Like there is a comedicness in his framing that I find absolutely brilliant. And then he's also using that same really skilled eye to make it absolutely terrifying. Girl has been completely ostracized by her town, doesn't talk to anybody, and that is kind of the biggest thing to know about the movie. Is she does not speak throughout the whole movie because she can't, nobody wants to talk to her. And so she lives in this house on the edge of town, and she realizes early that like there's weird things happening, there's things being left in people's yards. And one night she basically wakes up and there has been an alien invasion, and then the next hour or so becomes her trying to tell the rest of the town about the aliens and save herself, but no one will talk to her because of this thing that happened that ostracized her from the entire town. So she's all by herself in this house trying to figure out how to fight off the aliens that she knows are coming for her. It's great. I had a blast with this movie, and the aliens look really good. That's become my biggest hang up with aliens, I've discovered, is they're going to be digital. No matter how you slice it, you're going to have to digitize them to a degree. And the aliens look really good in this, to the point that it didn't pull me out.
Yeah, it's a little bit more in the Signs world, and I think Signs did a really good
Mm-hmm.
job.
Yep.
This is, of all the movies this year, this is the one I think would have benefited most. Not saying it could have even been made, but being on a screen, because it's very cinematic. He's made a and I wish, like, I think I'm gonna love watching it again, and I think I'll probably
Mm-hmm.
watch this movie more than some of the movies on my top 10. You know what I mean? I tend to be going for the kind of movies often that I would want to make. You know, you end up picking movies like that. But it is terrific and super. His voice is super interesting. You know,
Yeah.
always can't wait to see what he does next. Okay, I'll be curious. We're in the last two. I'm curious if my number two will be your number one. I would be bummed if this one isn't on your list, but let's find out. My number two is the most disturbing movie of the year.
Higher.
Okay, I will name it, but I'm pretty sure we're in the same place. When Evil Lurks.
Higher.
Okay, good. Oh, well, when you're higher than two, you're in a good place. Directed by Damien Runga. Okay, so we will hold on When Evil Lurks, and we will go.
Well, we can talk about it
Your
now because
number
I'm at my
one.
number one. So my number one film of the year is When Evil Lurks, by Damien Rugna, Argentinian filmmaker, previously known for Terrifier, Terrify, not Terrifier.
I'd say
Terrify.
he might be the realest one going, because me and you can't really. I mean, I can't be scared that much, but
This movie fucked me up.
Terrified it, and his short film on Satanic Hispanics this year fucked me up. So,
All of them.
so I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's rolling.
This movie, I was howling, and I saw this movie in the worst possible setting, where I was sitting in the middle of my bed in like bright bedroom light watching it on a laptop. Because whatever the screening link we had been given for this, I couldn't get it. A lot of times I'll like AirPlay it over to my television, but it had some type of block on it, so I couldn't do that. So I'm watching it on my tiny ass laptop in the middle of my bed. And I was howling through this whole thing, just shocked, because it is just it is like an Evil Dead level of like escalating violence, where you don't realize how it's going to go, and it just keeps going and keeps going, and oh my god, where it ends is just it went to places I couldn't even imagine.
And real tonal mastery. Like, this person's making a very bleak tonal movie, and yet you're still enjoying watching it because it's surprising you at times. And
it's,
you know,
so
if I say goat scene, or if I say dog scene, or I say kid scene, I'm not even telling you what those are. Those are three of the most fucking crazy sequences of this year.
Oh my god.
In terms of violence and tone, you know?
Oh, it was so violent. But yeah, like I had such a powerful time watching it. I'm hesitant to call it a good time just because of what it is. But at the same time, I look back, and I mean, there was an enjoyment in it. It's like a cathartic enjoyment that I went through it, and I was like, well, fuck, I've never seen anything like that before. The setup is that this is in Argentina, in not the countryside, but definitely a more rural area where everybody's kind of spread out. They two guys are going through one of the more rural areas one day, and they find this dead priest, and they realize that he was traveling through town, and he was headed to this one house in specific. And they travel to the house, and they're like, look, we're sorry to tell you, we looks like you were about to get a visitor. We found him and he's dead, and we just wanted to let you know he's not coming. And the mom breaks down into tears, and she's like, oh my God, I needed him here because my son has, what do they call it? The darkness? They have
Yeah,
a
something
specific
like that.
name
Yeah.
for it. Yeah. That my son has, and they have a specific term for it. And it basically means that he's possessed. And her son is like grotesque and tied down to a bed and like threatening things, and fluids oozing out of every orifice. And they're like, we have to get him out of here. He is going to poison the entire town with this evil. We have to get him out of here. And so they start moving him and transporting the body, and they basically just dump it and leave it somewhere. And then it starts spreading everywhere. And basically, it spreads like an infection where every single person who has come in contact with something that touched the body, a cloth, your hand, anybody who is in the vicinity of it becomes infected with it. So it's almost like an infection movie. But what it is spreading is, I can't even call it like a possession movie. It's hell. It's like
Yeah,
spreading
it's so much
the
darker than a possession
the
movie.
30-second clip scene from Event
Yeah,
Horizon.
for a whole
That
movie.
is what it spreads
Yeah.
for a whole movie.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's just it's the most impressive movie of the year because it's the level of world building I haven't quite seen by anyone in a while. Like, and
Mhm.
when I say world building, I'm like, because it's not like it's a sci-fi world, but like within minutes, they're giving you a whole new mythology. People, characters who already believe stuff that they don't even take time to explain. They show you incredible instruments that don't even end up being used. Like, it's just got so much going in it, and yet you go on this ride, and it's so bleak. It's just, I saw this at the Beyond Fest screening, and he was there probably the day before you watched The Link. We were right
Mhm.
around the same time, and we just walked out going, okay, it's been a while since a movie has like taken it out of you, where you walk out going, holy shit, this guy he is the guy right now, like, in my opinion, in terms of horror director. Just like one of those people where it's like whatever happens, because I don't want to underestimate the short on the anthology part on Satanic Hispanics was also so fascinating and
Mhm.
interesting. And it's just like, so it's like he's got this big world he's working towards. Yeah, I really love this was a Shudder film, and they just nailed it. And this is officially the by far the highest rated film by the two of us, because it's number one on your list and number two on mine, and that is very high. That's, not only in unison but almost lockstep right there. So
Yeah.
watch it if you haven't. It is definitely not a feel good movie, especially that goat scene.
Nope.
It is a fucked up movie.
Oh my God.
Which takes me to my number one, which was this was never in question for me. It's just like it's been my number one all year. In the same way I felt about It Follows. I mean, I just had so much fun watching it, and that is Talk to Me, which was your
Seven.
number seven. There's something
Mhm.
about this movie that for me, and also I love films shot in Australia and places like that. It delivered what I feel is like the positive of like what a next generation filmmaker, in the same way that the director of Boogeyman, he's one as well, where they are bringing in a slightly different language, still cinematic, but you
Mhm.
feel the fact that these guys were YouTubers and they made clever shit and fast shit and they knew how to be smart, bringing that into mixed with the cinematic, and then just kind of making something that feels just a little bit different by like even 10%. It feels fresh and new and just fun. And I thought it was a great mixture of a great emotional performance by Sophie Wilde in the lead, and kind of a depressed character, very dark kind of interior, mixed with a very fun big concept of horror. And some of the scenes in this when they touch this hand, and it's just about these people coming up with, they have this hand that they found, and it's meant to be the hand of a mystic or whatever, and they record you afterwards being possessed, you invite it into your body, you see another spirit, like all of that's clever and everything, but when you actually see the other spirit, it's actually fucking scary. And when it starts to get real dark, and it's about the younger brother and the things that are going to happen to him, alluded to, it is like watching the darkest scene of society, which is never that dark because you're watching a goopy, silly comedy. The
Yeah.
implication of that to a real person is so devastatingly dark that there was moments in this movie where I was like, oh my God. And I was like scared for the person.
Mhm.
I just think it's a brilliant movie, a brilliant debut. And I'll, whatever Danny and Michael, I know you were on a panel recently with Michael.
I just hung out with Danny last
Oh, Danny,
weekend.
no, not Michael.
Yeah.
With Ryan.
No, Danny was
Yeah.
there. I think that one of a couple of really cool things that I learned on the panel was that they'd been shopping this around for a really
Hmm.
long time, and that a lot of studios
Even
had
though they're
liked
18
the
years old,
concept. I know, that's the wild thing.
they look like kids.
No, and he shows up and he definitely, it
They have
was
a
very
young
much like
energy. Let's
the
just say a
youngin
very young
of the
energy.
group. Yeah, it was the rest of us were like, horror people who've been in this, doing this for a while, and then, yeah, it was definitely a different vibe. And but he was talking about how they'd been shopping this around for a long time, and a lot of the studios came in with notes to make it very vanilla. That a lot of the studios liked the concept, but then they would come in with these notes to make it very much a studio ghost film, and that they didn't want to do that, and so just sticking to their guns and saying like, we'll pass on that. And oh, we're not going to let you guys direct. We'll take your concept, we're going to have other people rewrite it, things like that, like ready to just take it and run and go hire whoever the hot person of the minute to rewrite it is. And seeing that they stuck to their guns and were like, no, you know what, we'll do it our own way, we'll figure it out, we'll figure out and find the money whenever we can. And then listening to them talk, we were talking about IPs on the panel, and listening to Danny talk about how they're scared to death of doing like a big franchise film because of the hype behind it, of the expectations that people go into it with, that there is always going to be somebody who's like, nah, that's not the blank I remember, or that's not the one from my
Totally. Yeah.
youth, or and so yeah, kind of knowing that they're ready for this next big step. And I think they've already signed on to Street Fighter from Legendary, which I will say is an IP, but it's not one that you walk into with a this happens, then this happens, then
Because
this
no one's
happens.
nailed the movie
Like,
versions.
yeah.
None of the film
I,
versions were like
I loved, wait, was that Mortal? No, I
bad.
liked
Yeah,
Mortal
Mortal
Kombat.
Kombat's more fun.
I suddenly had to remember the song, Mortal
Yeah, no, Street
Kombat.
Fighter
And
was
then I
the
was
Van
like,
Damme one. It's very strange. The kind of
yeah. And so it doesn't
yeah.
kind of have that established, like, this is what this movie needs to be going into it. But yeah, them kind of realizing that there's expectations behind a lot of things. But that said, I think Danny mentioned on the panel that, they're still pushing original ideas around
And a
too, which I
sequel to
love.
this has already been
Mhm.
greenlit from A24.
Yep.
So, and again, A24 is such a great home for movies like this when they are outside. But it's not, It Follows is still my favorite of these kind of movies. But this one is in that context, and it's one I actually am very excited. I almost rewatched it
Mhm.
last night, and I'm kind of looking forward to just revisiting it because it's just smart and fun. And Miranda Otto as the mom's great, and I
Yeah.
love that you can have something that dark but also be fun. It's a hard thing to articulate sometimes without it being a comedy, but fun is the roller coaster fun, and they totally got that. So my number one is Talk to Me. That is a hell of a list. Let's recap our list, and then if you had any that just narrowly missed, we could,
Yep.
because there's a
I got a
couple.
couple.
You've already mentioned a couple of mine, so let's go. You do from 10 to 1.
At number 10, Suitable Flesh. 9 was Sick. 8, Last Voyage of the Demeter. 7 was Talk to Me. 6 was Renfield. 5 was The Boogeyman. 4 was Swallowed. 3, Evil Dead Rise. 2, No One Will Save You. And number 1, When Evil
So I
Lurks.
believe that makes 3. We
3,
share.
only
Sorry, that's
3.
exactly right. Okay.
You're right.
Candyland at 10, Venus at 9, Cobweb at 8, Infinity Pool at 7, Beau is Afraid at 6, All Eyes at 5, Godzilla -1 at 4, Evil Dead Rise at 3. You would have had Godzilla would be on yours, I'm pretty sure.
I'm
Evil
sure.
Dead Rise at 3, When Evil Lurks at 2, and then Talk to Me at number 1. Great list. I think we also got a couple smaller ones in there that I think will be nice for people to discover.
Mhm.
So I feel good about these lists. What did you feel badly? Did you feel bad about leaving anything off? Mine was probably Last Voyage of Demeter that I felt bad about, but
Totally Killer. That was the
uh-huh.
one that I said was kind of a more over the top
Yeah,
comedy horror. It's less horror than
definitely a
comedy
comedy that happens to be about slashers. Yeah.
about slashers. But that said, I still really enjoyed it and had a really good time with it. It just barely missed my list. Also El Conde is another one where I'll say
You
it's
talked about it.
more comedy, it's more darkly comedic satire than it is horror. This one's on Netflix, and I think I mentioned it on our show in October, but it's definitely more comedic satire than horror. The horror is just kind of infused there, but I walked away really impressed with how well done the movie was and what a good satire it was. A couple others I can throw out. Five Nights at Freddy's had an absolute blast with. I wanted to include it just for my kids. Same with Megan. My
Yeah,
kids, I mean,
Megan's an omission, I think, on both of us. I think I might have thought maybe it was going to be higher on yours. It is a very fun movie and a very well
yeah.
made movie. Maybe it's a little less of a me movie. That's why it's not on my 10. If it was on what are the best films of the year, objective, yes, it would be in the top 10.
And I want to cheer the director on because that's the guy who did Housebound. So like I
Yes.
just
Yeah, the
want
Kiwi, yeah.
to, keep cheering them on and whatever they do
Andrew
next. But
Johnson.
that's that my daughter, Jared
Jared,
Johnston,
yeah,
I believe. Yeah.
Johnson.
And my daughter has probably watched Megan 10 times this year. Like that is by far it's gateway horror.
Yeah.
And she has absolutely loved
And it's
it.
fun. It makes me excited to see more of them because the world's fun. And
Yeah.
I had,
Okay.
oh yeah, well, Malum I thought is very interesting, and it's
Mhm.
one I want to rewatch again because I like it, and I like that it's trying to just be a fucked up fucking dark horror film, and I
Yeah.
that's missing some years, and so I really appreciate that. Sometimes some parts I think are still creepier in the original that he made because it's lo-fi, and so it actually sometimes it's creepy. But Malum's also the more polished, and I thought Clark Wolf was really like surprise
Mhm.
things that I wasn't expecting. Cool movie. And then I do want to talk about these three because if this was the objective / historic importance, the fact that there's another shift in this industry, they're not making our list because they obviously didn't connect in this quite. But the Outwaters, Skinamarink, Ennie's Man,
I have them on my list as
yeah,
well.
like they're all different and they're all doing slightly different things, but they're of a new type of horror, especially Outwaters and Skinamarink. Ennie's Man is just a little different, but still somehow feels like it's of that conversation. We're All Going to the World's Fair was the previous year, and it fits perfectly with this,
Dimland, I think was the
Yeah.
year that was 2019. Feels the same.
I think they're more interesting to talk about and watching as parts than necessarily the whole movie. I'm sure Skinamarink will be at the top of quite a few film lists this year, for some people. I definitely was in it, like when I watched it on my thing, but I'm also like not excited at it as well. Like I'm excited about moments of it, and then also like, about other Outwaters. I thought if it was shorter would really have connected.
I liked Outwaters.
Yeah, Outwaters has got some
Yeah.
brilliant stuff. It maybe was a little too long for the kind of movie it is. And Eddie's Man, I know, frustrated you, and a lot of people I know found it very repetitive. I liked.
I found that was
design
it.
of
Is I was just like, oh my god,
Yeah.
can we just get to the heart? There wasn't heart. It was just repetition. But it's exactly this. It's
Yeah.
being stuck in a vibe.
Yeah, they're
and
all
not
vibes,
being able to escape it.
and they're very personal. Each of them, especially Skinamarink, seems incredibly personal. It seems like somebody just taking all this stuff from their childhood and like locking you into their one nightmare they had when they're 8. And on that level, I'm really impressed. I think hype hurts these types of things, right? So if you watched it early, you were probably really affected. If you watched it in a theater, maybe it didn't work. I watched it on my computer, but not knowing much, and it kind of did work, but I had to work for it. It wasn't an easy watch.
No, I would spend 10 minutes going, oh, that's cool. And then I would spend 20 going, how long are we going to look at this wainscoting? And please move the camera. And
yeah.
Yeah.
But knowing that it's a $15,000 or $10,000 movie versus what Hollywood does, and it can still make a couple million, you're like, okay, movies are never gonna just die, right? Like you can always reinvent something, you can always try something out, and it should be inspiration for young horror filmmakers because that's one way to do it, versus trying to make your film that's like $1 million movie, but you don't have $1 million. So interesting year in horror, like whether it's the best, I don't know, but
a couple more that I just have to drop. Absolute silliness. I have to give love to Slaughterhouse just because it was such a fun theatrical experience for the two of us.
When he's in the car, I don't know. I should have probably gotten in my car, but when the sloth starts driving off, I don't know.
I do.
Had its moments.
It had its moments. There were moments where I was like, this is way too good for what it is. And I was in Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. I feel the same way about it. It is just absolute bonkers insanity, but there was something I found really charming and fun throughout. Meg 2. Okay, this is not
either of the Megs
anybody's.
Yet, so.
Okay, both of them always get horrible critical reviews. But do like gangbusters at the box office, which is a guarantee that we'll get another one, which is what I need. I had a blast with this one. So I had a blast with the first one. I just like giant sharks, y'all. It doesn't even, I can't say what the plot was. Actually, I can say what the plot was in this one. It wasn't as complicated. But that said, it's a fucking giant shark, and Jason Statham punches him at one point. And I don't need anything fucking else when I see this movie. I want popcorn. I want Jason Statham to kick a shark, which he does. And that's all I need. And then there's a giant octopus in there too. So
Oh,
Meg
okay, I
too.
didn't know
It's
that.
a mention.
I'm
Yeah.
a Crank purist, and so that's the only movie I want to watch Statham in.
Crank's
But
great.
if Crank and Meg, if it was the Crank character versus Meg, that actually makes sense. Like if
It kind of
okay,
is.
all right, maybe I
You
got
need
to
to
do it.
watch them.
Okay.
It kind of is. I got to give some love for My Religious Horrors Deliver Us and Pope's Exorcist. And I got to say, one that has kind of stuck with me, which I was not expecting. This has only been at
Uh-huh.
festivals. When I saw Where the Devil Roams, when we were at
Yeah.
Knoxville, we watched like 4 films that day. If you'd asked me at the end of the day which one was my fave, it would not have been Where the Devil Roams. But I keep thinking
Yeah,
about it.
I'm the
And
same way. I think it was easier to point out like, oh well, this sequence is shot different than this, or this is a little long, or they don't have the budget. And then once that's gone, after you've watched a movie, it starts to be like, no, this was very ambitious, very interesting,
yeah,
very like they're just fascinating filmmakers, and we're definitely going to try to get them on the show next year. We talked.
I have
Yeah,
to. So this is a family that makes movies,
yeah.
and I can't even organize my family to get their shoes on and get out the door to go to breakfast on
Technically, you
most
made a
days.
movie when you were fully pregnant, so it's almost like a family movie. But
No, because they had no say in
that's
it.
true.
Like
Yeah,
they're sentient beings now. Like
yeah,
these are teenagers who
yeah.
are helping their parents. I can't even like Marnie's not going to listen to me no matter what I say. I could be like, you should put on the orange shirt, and she'll like, wear the black one just because I recommended something. So the idea of kind of working together as a filmmaking team, I can't even think about that. So yeah, and this movie, just the context of it, the plot line, how much the story kind of moves along and the time that it traverses, I have not stopped thinking about it since we saw it at
Yeah,
Knoxville. And
movies are great like that because
yeah,
it doesn't, you react when that's why you do your star rating or you don't in your case when you first see something, but
I
then
never do.
over time it changes and things can go up, and that's the fun thing about it.
Which is why I quit doing my star rating, because I would watch something and give it 2 stars, and then I'd look back a year ago and be like, God, I was in a bitchy mood then,
Yeah,
and it should have 4. What was
I
I
like to
thinking?
change it. That's why I like
Yeah.
to do. But I get, and no, I agree with you. That's a good one, and I would say because it just dropped, and I thought it might make a list. The best open of a movie might be Sacrifice Game. For a good
Mm-hmm.
cold open, you want to see like a really just like balls to the wall start to a movie, and it's just come out, so it's probably good timing that we're giving that little plug at the end because you can watch it right now on Shudder, and it's a Christmas movie, so check that one out.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
That's the end of our
Okay.
year. We're done.
Woo!
We're gonna hang it up for a few weeks, and then we'll still be doing some
We
Patreons
got some deep cuts
about Depot
coming, so
cuts if you're on
I got
there.
a whole list of Tubi hits to watch while I'm on break. So let's do this.
Yeah, I'm gonna go watch some historic epic that I'm not allowed to watch during the year. Because
I'm deep into my true crime. This
all
is when
right,
I catch up. And Great British Baking Show Christmas is on. So that's like the other one where I'm like, I could take a night off from horror and watch Great
yeah.
British Baking Show. So let's do it.
But we shall return in mid-January, and thank you. And hopefully you discovered some cool movies through us. And if you want the weirder or deeper cuts, go subscribe to Patreon and Deep Cuts. And big thank you for a year of support from Fangoria.
Thank you, Fangoria. We will see you early in January 2024. Have a great night, everyone. The Colors of the Dark podcast is a Fangoria production. Producers and co-hosts are Rebekah McKendry and Elric Kane. Executive producers are Tara Ainsley and Abby Gould. Sonic branding by Michael Rodriguez. And, of course, our amazing sound engineer, Ernie Hurtado.